Thank you.
And I was like, I'm pretty sure I've reviewed this one. And there they are, right? I would gladly give it to you. I tried to watch my dad. Okay, you don't want too much. I also, you want one of those?
It's in the booklet.
Right now.
Good morning. If I could have everyone's attention this morning, welcome to the Walton County Technical Review Committee meeting for August 7th, 2019. Do we have any announcements this morning, Karen? Other than, I think we'll just take everything in order. First item of business is review and approval of the minutes from July 17th. Everybody had an opportunity to take a look at that. We have any changes proposed to the minutes?
Max, seeing no changes, I motion to approve the minutes of the July 17th meeting.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed likewise? The motion is carried. We'll move right into our project review this morning. The first project review we have is the Down Island Restaurant. We have a request to continue to the August 21st, 2019 Technical Review Committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. in this location. Any comments from the applicant?
I had a couple questions. Well, as you know, we got our variance for the side setback, but just a couple of small questions. Overall acreage on the survey, it consists of 3 parcels. Each parcel is labeled with the acreage. Do I need to get the surveyor to add another note to add them all up? Okay. Agent affidavit for Gulf South Hospitality LLC. They're the owner. We wouldn't be providing an agent affidavit for them. Gulf South is the owner. Down Island is the applicant. Yeah, okay, that was the other one. Provide an agent affidavit for Down Island LLC.
Do we have an agent affidavit for Mr. Henderson Engineering?
Yeah.
From Down Island?
Was it Down Island or, yeah, no, it was Gulf South provided the agent affidavit for me, the property owner, yeah. Okay, so that number 3, provide an agent affidavit for Gulf South Hospitality, that really doesn't apply. Gulf South, number 4 applies. Gulf South needs to apply.
Gulf South isn't.
They need to provide the agent affidavit for Down Island, but that's number 4. Okay. Yeah, okay, so number 4 is required, but not number 3. No, number 3 says provide an agent affidavit for Gulf South Hospitality LLC. Number 4 says provide an agent affidavit for Down Island LLC. So we need an agent affidavit for Down Island. Gulf South provides that agent affidavit for Down Island.
Yeah.
But nobody provides an agent affidavit for Gulf South. They're the owner.
Right.
So number 3 doesn't apply. We don't provide an agent affidavit for the owner.
No, providing it for the applicant.
Yeah, okay. There was a couple of things on the chart with the, scenic corridor comments.
Butler.
Yeah, can we just label the elevations, or do we need to provide a rendering?
Some of those are marked met and not met.
The DRB wants color rendering, so you can, usually they do one or both ways. Sometimes they give black and white elevations that have the color on it, which is fine, but they want to see a color, they want to see what it's going to look like.
Sure. Okay.
Or you can put it on the color one, right? The Munsell color. Either way, usually they do it both. They'll give the elevations and they'll list the color on there, and then they'll provide the color rendering.
Okay. I think there was one more that,
Minimum 12 foot to the eave, that says not met. It's an existing building. Do we need any kind of exception for that?
No, that'd be on your addition.
Okay.
If you're gonna do it the same way, just identify that addition is just like the
Congruent
existing.
or whatever?
Yeah, okay.
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 that's the only thing I had.
The railings, wood railings. Some of the existing stuff is wood. We're gonna go back with wood. Do we have to go with the metal railings or concrete? I mean, it doesn't really match the character of that building. Would we need a section or something for that?
I think you would need a deviation to that
Deviation.
because anything new has to meet the code. Anything there is there,
Yeah,
but wood isn't an approved
yeah.
material.
Metal
Right,
railings.
So,
right. Okay.
and you know, they might approve it because you're wanting to keep it consistent, right? I don't want
Right.
to have one of one and one,
Yeah,
you
Okay.
want it consistent.
all right, that's all the questions I had. Do you have anything?
Just so we're not going back and forth, Tim, where do you want the monument sign? I mean, is there, where should we put it? So we're not going back and forth on where the sign
What-
should go.
It has to be in the scenic corridor buffer, the first 25 feet. It
Right.
can be anywhere in there, as long as it, you know,
Show
it
it
doesn't
right there.
affect
Is that good?
the visibility triangle, but it has to be in the first 25 feet.
It doesn't
I'm
matter
showing
what,
it right there.
what side of the entrance it's on?
No. No. But you have to bring it forward with your project.
Yeah, I understand. I didn't want to have a sign.
After.
If you'll bear with us for just a few moments, we got some technical difficulties with our recording computer. And we take about a 10-minute recess.
Caesar's legions crossed through the American Revolution, technology of transportation never improved. It took the exact same time. Only after the invention
Pretty sure, once it's done, gone.
it passed through. That the lever removed fast at British Army. I think that's pretty cool. Because the salt is just like
Technical difficulty there. But it's important that our PowerPoint be available on the screen, and that's what we were trying to get accomplished. So thank you for bearing with us. We have a motion on the table.
Motion to continue the meeting to the August 21st TRC in this building at
8:30.
8:30.
We have a motion on the table. I think we had a second before. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed likewise? This item is continued to the August 21st. August 21st, it's August 22nd. No, wait a minute. Make sure I got the right year calendar. August 21st. That was correct. My apologies. This item is continued to August 21st at 8:30 a.m. in this location. That moves us to the next item, the High Five Topsail West Phase III application. Request to approve by final order. Minor development's been reviewed by Tim Brown. Tim, if you can briefly introduce it for us.
Yes, thank you. This item was continued from the July 17th TRC meeting. It's a minor development order application requesting approval to develop a 40,000 square foot family entertainment center with a 10,000 square foot expansion area on 4.47 acres with a future land use of mixed use and a zoning of coastal center mixed use. It's located at the northeast corner of West Hewitt Road and Dune Lakes Boulevard. It's been determined that this project requires approval by the Design Review Board. We still have outstanding comments from Public Works, and we need to determine the proportionate fair share for the project. With that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you. We have a request to continue to the 21st to give Public Works and the applicant an opportunity to review the Public Works comments from August 6th. We'll arrange that meeting right away to give you adequate time to respond to comments. We are still planning to hear this at DRB at the beginning of next month.
There's a number of outstanding scenic corridor comments. If they can resolve those, then sure.
If there's no further comment, I'll entertain a motion to continue to August 21st at 8:30 a.m. in this location. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Likewise. This item is continued to August 21st at 8:30 a.m. in this location. That moves us to item number 4, the Range Project. This is the major development reviewed by Bob Baronti. Bob, if you could give us a brief update.
Yes,
Oh, and before you start, if I could make one announcement, please. We are subject to automatic closed captioning. If you could state your name for the record, spell your last name when you come forward to speak. And if we can all do our best not to talk over one another, that will allow the automatic closed caption to be as accurate as possible on the replay of the public record.
Yes,
Sorry,
Mr.
Bob.
Chair. My name's Bob Baronti, Baronti. Project 3 is a request approved by final order, project number MAJ 19-000001. This is a major development order application submitted by Core Engineering and Consultants on behalf of 331 Properties LLC, requesting approval to construct an outdoor shooting range and associated infrastructure on 37.31 plus or minus acres with future land use and zoning districts of state residential. The project is located on the east side of US Highway 331 south, north of Wagon Wheel Road and south of Edgewood Circle, and it's identified by the project number in your staff report. Mr. Chair, before I turn it over to the applicant, I'd like to tell you what you got in your packet up there. You have a request from the opposition for a continuance. Then you have a letter from the applicant requesting not to continue it and their justification. And then you have a copy of the logging receipts of the property. The project itself has one outstanding comment. I received a review. The applicant has received a review yesterday from the environmental planner. There is still the same comment that's outstanding, but the applicant yesterday in a conference call was made aware and is in the motion of getting that changed and resubmitting. So with that being said, I will turn it over to the applicant.
Good morning, everyone. Stephen Tatum, Matthews and Jones. here on behalf of the Range Project. I'm not going to spend too much time with you guys because I know you are very familiar with the project. I did want to address some of the things that were brought up in the request to continue. First of all, we do have a determination that the sign notice was adequate, that when you continue to a date certain, the date on the sign does not have to be updated. The request to continue, for some reason, brings up the fact there's not an executed contract. There is an executed contract. It was provided to you guys in this letter also, but the county already had it. I'm not sure why they think there wasn't an executed one. They claim the application is not complete, but it's been deemed complete for months now. Just because you make resubmittals, that's not an issue. On a more specific, and it's issues you guys have had in the past, you asked specifically safety, range operation. We did provide our MSP, which is the safety rules, basically, management and safety plan. It is not an indemnification agreement, even though it does include that in it. It does provide a plethora of rules and regulations for how to use the site, what you can do, what you can't do, even it goes down to what your membership application is going to look like. Just to point out some highlights in that, there will always be a range safety officer on site at all times. The objectors are concerned about rifle fire, obviously that being the biggest problem, I think, because of the fear that it will leave the property. That's not an issue anymore. Unless you are RSO certified, which is your range safety officer, you will be firing what's called a no blue sky position. No blue sky means that you have some sort of ceiling or baffling above the muzzle so that limits the trajectory of the bullet. Bullet then can't skip over the back berm. So the only people that can fire without that has to be someone that is range safety officer certified. So that limits that problem. Also, there was some complaints about the use of armor-piercing ammunition. The RSO officer will examine all ammo before it's fired. No one will be using armor-piercing unless they are qualified to do so, and their target that they're shooting at is actually a target that they should be utilizing. There was concerns about the berm heights and the shooter location. For some reason, the objector's letter says that the NRA source book requires you to shoot uphill. That is counterintuitive to everything I know about shooting. Downhill is your best, safest way to make sure that you're not having a skip over from the berm. I'm not sure where that came from. The plans do require, actually the NRA source book requires a 20-foot backstop berm, not requires, but suggests a 20-foot backstop berm and an 8-foot side berm. We went with a 10-foot side berm based primarily on the recommendations from the expert range design people that we have contracted with. They're Clark Nixon. They are the industry leader in range engineering and architecture. They will be continuing to monitor our project as it moves forward. They provided a letter saying that it meets all the requirements of the source book, or all the guidelines from the source book. And the 10-foot side berms came from their recommendation. So even though the current source book says 8's okay, they said, well, you should go ahead and go with 10. Part of that is they are actually in the process now of helping the NRA rewrite the source book, and that probably is going to be something that gets integrated into the source book. Let's see here. Range operation, there was some talk about us continuing to have commercial operation on the site. That's not true. There was one event that was held on January 5th of 19. It technically wasn't a commercial event. There was no money made from it. They raised funds, but it wasn't pocketed. It was given to a charity. They hadn't technically been told at that point to cease commercial activity. They still technically haven't been told to cease commercial activity. It just makes sense to not, poke the bear, so to speak. Other concerns, the environmental concerns about the environmental stewardship plan that we provided. The ESP is a evolving document. It's not something that you can put in place and then just stay with it forever with it. The main function that it serves is to make sure that you don't have lead contamination into your groundwater. The way you do that is you monitor your lead content. You monitor how many rounds have been fired on the site, or come up with an estimate anyway. And we've contracted with a company called M2T. They're the leading lead reclamation company in the United States. They will be helping us monitor it. They will be doing at least annual site inspections, if not less. And then they will determine what the reclamation process needs to look like, because it may be that the site's not used enough that you would do it but every 3 or 4 years, or it may be that you need to do it every year. You know, there's no way to determine that right now. There was arguments about compatibility. The zoning district allows shooting ranges as an allowable use. Presumptively, that's because of the lower density that's allowed, 1 house per 5 acres. That area is even less dense than that. The actual development out there is much less than 1 per 5 acres. Beyond that, you've got an explosive ordnance corporation that is just to our east. You've got Eglin and Highway 331 to our west. Rock Hill Road to the south with all of those mining and borrow pits that are down there. All the truck traffic on that road, plus the truck traffic and vehicle traffic on 331. This is not your quiet little residential area that they're trying to paint it to be. The sound, that's an issue that is probably best left to code enforcement. We don't believe there's going to be any issues. Clark Nexon doesn't believe there's going to be any issues with sound being an issue beyond on the site. I don't think it'd be anything louder than a hand clap at best for the closest properties. We do have letters from all of the neighbors except for one that is in support of the project. Actually, the closest neighbor to the project that actually lives there has written a letter in support of us. So, you know, the sound we don't believe is going to be an issue at all, but there's no way to determine that 100% certain at this point. But we'll be providing some numbers before Planning Commission that show the anticipated sound levels inside structures from different gunfire from our location. Aside from that, just keep in mind that the overall usage of the project, one other thing, we have limited our hours of operation from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. Monday and Tuesday, they will be closed. 7 to 7 p. is actually less restrictive than what the Walton County Sound Ordinance requires for the criminal penalty anyway. You can, be loud up till 10 o'clock according to that. Overall usage, it's intended for military, police, other firearm experts to use the project. It's not intended for the general public to come in. They're not going to advertise to try to pull in the general public. They will allow members. I've just recently been told that the members will be background checked. And if any guests do stop in, they'll do what's called a quick background check. At least it's apparently something that's been set up recently that allows you to do internet-based, really fast, within just a couple hours background check. So that a guest comes in, they might be able to use the property depending on what the background check shows. Also, we do have two Green Berets that are part of this project, that are part of the partnership or the LLC that is running the project. They're probably the most expert group of people when it comes to firearms that, exists. So we have 15 letters of support, including the 2 closest neighbors. And like I said, we did provide, or as Bob said, we provided the timber receipts for where the main part of our range project is located. It was all timbered. That's why it was clear cut. That answers the environmental question, and that's something we can take care of in the interim between now and PC, and it's not a reason to hold this up. Any questions?
What were the hours of operation again proposed
7 A to 7 P.
and the days?
Wednesday through Sunday.
Any questions?
Anything else?
The dais?
All right, just a chance for rebuttal if needed. Thank you.
Yes, sir. This is a major development, and there will be a public hearing at the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners once this, provided this development reaches those stages. At this time, we're going to take any questions or comments related to the technical compliance with the Land Development Code or comprehensive plan. Anybody wishing to speak? You could come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Well, we've talked before. My name is Kelly O'Keefe. For the record, it's KELLYO''KEEF, as in Frank, E. And I represent Mr. Mike Clark, who is a neighbor of the proposed development. First, I did want to thank the group for meeting with us on July 11th. Following the July 3rd TRC meeting, we met with Mr. Baronti and Mr. Carpenter and counsel for the county. And the intent of that meeting was to try and work through some of the issues that we have raised in the past. We have identified, after receiving the resubmissions that followed that meeting, we actually expected that those resubmissions would be submitted shortly after the July 11th meeting because the intent was to have this meeting or have the project presented at the July 17th meeting. We received those resubmissions early last week and submitted a response letter on August 2nd to raise additional questions that we think require that the project be moved to the next TRC meeting. This has been a really difficult process, I think, for those involved, particularly those in the public who've tried to follow along. There's been a number of reasons for that. The initial, I think, primary reason and kind of where we started down or where everything started to go down the wrong road was when the applicant built and began operating a gun range before obtaining the required development order. And over the last 9 months, I think, since the process has progressed, since a development application was submitted, there's been confusion over what is required, or the applicant has had trouble determining what has been required. We've, I think, over the course of the process, helped them actually to identify some of the things that should be addressed and could have been addressed probably before they started with the development and operation of the firing range. Now, Mr. Tatum referenced the commercial use. Just to bring everybody up to speed, those uses, there were code violation complaints filed with respect to the development, with respect to the uses. Those development order, or the complaints that were filed have been addressed, and there have been orders indicating that the development was in violation, but the commercial use was an issue that was left open. Admittedly, the applicant has performed or had operated a event on January of this year, January 5th. There's video of that online. You can look at that. We've cited that in our August 2nd letter. But the point, and I'll try to get to the point, sorry for the delay on this, but I just wanted to give the background. But the point is that code violation order remains pending. And as a result, what we have here is a postponement, or a number of postponements that have occurred. It's our position that the code, based on what has transpired, would require the rejection of this application, the process start again, et cetera. But for whatever reason, we've taken this route, we're moving in this direction, and the postponements have continued while, while the application or the applicant has continued to submit additional documentation in order to support the application. So this is why the citizens are having problems following this process. It's been a long one, and it's been difficult to get information on the portal for whatever reason, including the fact that the submissions have not been complete. Mr. Clark and others are looking for a transparent process. They want to be able to follow this process. They want to know what is going to happen, particularly with regard to safety, with regard to environmental issues, and with regard to noise as well. And those are some of the items that we discussed at the July 11th meeting. At this stage, as Mr. Carpenter noted, that they are able to receive, or they should be receiving notice. Mr. Tatum indicated that the determination of whether or not notice was given for this particular meeting, appropriate notice, had been resolved. We raised in our letter, the August 2nd letter, the fact that the notice that sits on the property right now contains a date of July 17th for the TRC meeting. If you recall, on July 3rd, when we came to the meeting, that meeting had been improperly noticed with respect to the location, and there were people that were actually at another location. And so the meeting was continued, and hence we had the July 11th meeting in order to determine whether we could go forward with the July 17th meeting. The notice of the next meeting given here was that the meeting would occur on July 17th. But subsequently, that meeting was moved. However, the sign still had the July 17th date. So the sign, as it sits, still has the improper date. We got some mixed messages in terms of whether or not that was appropriate. But we looked at the sign notice requirement in the code, which is 1.1105, which says the applicant shall post a sign on the property or directly in front of the property that is visible from the public right-of-way no less than 14 days prior to any and all public meetings at which the application will be considered. That sign shall be 36 by 36 and shall contain the name of the project, the date, the time and location of the public hearing, etc. So we called and said, is it postponed as a result? Got some mixed messages, and were initially advised that we thought that there was a sign that was appropriate, and then that the sign, that the date issue was not necessarily an issue for reasons that we certainly couldn't comprehend. But after reading the letter that was provided by Range Projects Consultants, we understand that the claim that has been made is that a different section of the code applies. And that is a section of the code that actually applies to legislative procedures, such as comp plan amendments. That provision, 1.1104A2F, states, any public hearing or meeting may be continued by the body conducting the hearing to a fixed date, time, and place announced during the hearing. So we're confused as to why that particular provision applies where it's intended to apply to legislative proceedings where policy is made, not application of those policies, as well as the fact that at the at the July 3rd meeting, the next meeting was noticed for July 17th. However, a subsequent change was made, so at the hearing, there was no indication that the meeting was going to be moved to this date. So others can tell you that there are individuals who wanted to attend the meeting, didn't make arrangements to attend the meeting, didn't know there was a meeting. And they'll talk to you about that. There's a few people here to address that. So for that reason, we do think that the meeting should be continued on the basis of notice. But we've also raised in our letter the issues of incompleteness. Now, again, the July 11th meeting was an attempt to work through some of these issues. And there are some issues we thought we had worked through, but still the questions remain open. And so there's really three different aspects that I want to cover with you in terms of completeness. First of all, I want to cover a couple reasons that we stated in our August 2nd letter. I do want to get some clarification on the environmental issue that was just raised. I'm not aware, and I don't think it's been posted, as to what the specific issue is. If it's an issue that's raised in the TRC's latest report, maybe we can clear that up and we can have that discussion now. But before we get to those issues, I do want to cover several issues that we raised in our letter. And I do want to cover, again, the timeline, the differences in issues we seem to have with the timeline and how the process is proceeding, because there seem to be different positions that have been taken by those in the public as opposed to Range Project. So let me start, and this is an issue that I'm clear on. When we met on July 11th, we talked about the need for a contract for the sale of this additional parcel that is going to be part of the overall project. That is, they refer to it in the application as Parcel B. And originally, we received a contract that was signed by the seller alone. The contract was signed in April. At the July 11th meeting, the county requested that that contract be provided. A contract was provided yesterday. The contract, as I understand, was provided yesterday, and again, this is where my confusion comes in. I don't understand why it wasn't provided after the July 11th meeting. I don't understand why it wasn't provided after it was signed by at least one party in April of 2019. My understanding is that there have been misrepresentations made to the seller. I'm sorry, yes, the seller. And I just learned of this, so I'm passing on information that has been communicated to me just before this meeting. This is what I
And
understand.
you're going way
Appreciate that.
beyond at this point.
I'm sorry?
What's the misrepresentation?
The misrepresentation was made to Mr. Queen that he would submit and sign the contract. First of all, he agreed that he would sign the contract after. This is the representation that's made to be. Mr. Queen said he would sign after this meeting. He believed and he was told that he understood this would be the approval process and that he would sign afterwards. The indication was there was going to be $1,000 down payment on the new contract, and there's no $1,000 non-payment. There's a contract that is now submitted that's been signed by Mr. Queen in April, and now it's been signed by the seller, post-dated to April. It's confusing. That's why I'm saying this doesn't make any sense. Why was it filed yesterday instead of when the contract was executed by Mr. McQueen? So those questions remain. The validity of the contract remains. That's something I haven't been able to assess, but we would have been able to assess had that contract been filed weeks ago when it was requested.
I'm going to address that right now. This is a signed contract. It's been entered into evidence. It's adequate for Walton County. Purpose.
Okay.
They have the authority to apply for a development order using this land.
And they do have the ability to sign for the development order. I guess that's an issue that we will raise if they actually have the ability to proceed with the contract. But we would have liked the opportunity to have addressed that at the time that we were trying to work through those issues on July 11th. So that's my point.
With regard to the negotiations between the buyer and the seller, I'm not sure that that's germane to this particular board.
Understood.
They provide an executed contract, and that's what we asked for.
Understood.
The arrangements between the buyer and the seller are a private matter that is of no concern to this board.
Yes, I understand. Like I said, I would have liked the opportunity to work through that issue in a timely manner. Beyond, outside the board. So, we didn't have that opportunity.
I'm not sure that you're required to have that opportunity.
Nor is it her business.
Right, that's a private contract between the buyer and the seller. As long as we have adequate information that indicates that the property is either under contract or has been sold, that's subject to the site plan,
Well,
we're good.
I understand. And if we go through the process and the time frame at which it was submitted, the time at which it was submitted is also an issue which will become clear. So I'll leave that for that discussion and go through that with you.
Okay.
Okay. The other issue is the safety plan. and we talked through this, and one of the issues that we specifically addressed during our meeting was the data for typical rounds that would be included in in the application. It was our understanding that information would be included so that you could understand how far the ammunition would travel. That's something's in the range source book. It's referenced consistently in the range source book, and that is something that we agreed would be provided. We agreed, no, you're not gonna get a list of the weapons or the guns that are gonna be used at the facility, but you'll have that information about the distances, so you'll be able to establish, or you'll be able to look at the concerns that may be there with regard to the ammunition traveling beyond the berms or the fence or those types of things. So that was a big issue, and that information is not provided, nor was it provided to the consultant. There's a letter from Mr. Nixon in the file, and that letter, if you look at it, confirms its review is not complete and it's ongoing. They haven't made a site visit yet, and they haven't set a date for a site visit. So that is going to be relevant to the safety issues. The completion of this will be relevant to the safety issues. And again, we're focusing primarily on how far these bullets are traveling. The letter actually states that it only performed a cursory surface danger zone review using data for typical rounds that may be fired at the facility. And Range Project, like I said, has not disclosed that information. And despite the fact that they indicated that they would provide that as part of the application. We're at this point, we have no idea how far the bullets are going to travel. We know there's a sniper tower. We don't know how far those bullets are going to travel. We are also concerned, and Mr. Tatum referenced the berms and the height of the berms. There are issues, and we've set that out in detail in the letter, the questions that were raised with respect to those. There's issues with regard to the grading. There's issues with regard to where the targets sit. There's issues with regard to where the stands are and how those stands will be set up so as to determine where an individual will be shooting from. So you can't see the firing line. So you don't know what the range needs to be for the berms. You can't tell. Those are issues that should be clear from the application so that we can look in this and say, yes, it does meet safety concerns. It does meet range source or the NRA's range source book concerns. But based on what's been filed, we're not able to make that determination. Really, all we know from what they've submitted is that they do plan to use armor-piercing rounds, but we've heard now that they're not going to use those armor-piercing rounds with exception. So this is another example of we raise these issues and the response is.
Oh, that's in the plan.
That's in the.
It says in the plan that the ammo will be inspected by the range safety officer.
Okay, then I've misspoken. It's in the plan, but it doesn't say anything about armor-piercing bullets and how far they'll travel and what is the expectation. They can travel for miles. And with regard to the plan, with regard to the safety plan, if you look at it, what they've submitted is a set of rules, but the safety plan includes more than that. It includes looking at what the consultant has examined to determine what size the berms need to be, essentially. And we can't determine that based on what's been provided. We don't know how far the ammunition or the caliber of the ammunition, how far it's going to travel. We don't know where these things are going to be set up or how they're going to be set up. And that's not clear from the plan. That's still lacking. One issue I did want to address is the site plan, the date of the site plan. There's been some question as to, or some reference to the fact that we have looked at a prior site plan, one that is out of date. my understanding that the current site plan, and if we go online, the reference there, the site plan that was recently submitted has a date of May 17th. So that is the site plan that we were looking at. I don't think there's any question as to whether or not we're looking at the correct site plan and making an assessment of what questions still remain.
The date on the site plan is July 25th, 19. I don't know where you're coming up with May from, unless you're just pulling down the wrong thing.
Okay, so let's take a look at, and I don't have a magnifying glass, but the plan that you submitted on the 25th has a date on it of May 17th.
Yeah, that's the original date, but then you look at your revision chart.
I haven't seen one with a revision chart, so
On
let
the
me pull
front
it up.
page.
Let me pull it up if you would.
Christ, y'all, this is a huge waste of time.
Well, let me put it this way. This is another example of how confusing this has been. It's difficult to follow this.
It's not difficult to follow a chart. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, I'm sorry.
Mr. Tatum, if you would, please let me continue.
Mr. Tatum, you will be afforded rebuttal to each and every one of these points.
Thank you. The site plan that we have, that was resubmitted on the 25th or the 26th, references May 17th. And on the revisions section, for example, on C101, there are no revisions. The only date on the plan is 5/17/16. So you're raising this and you're telling us that we're not looking at the right site plan, but we're looking at the site plan that's online right now. Yeah. Can I take a look at it?
Download the whole document.
I have in the original, in the date is, and it does have revision date.
Okay, so I can clear this up. The date we're looking at, we are looking at the same site plan, and they've made an indication, they've referenced, they've challenged our analysis and said, we are looking at the wrong document. We're not. This is the same document that we're looking at, and this document is the one that we've said contains incomplete information and does not allow us to assess the caliber, the grading issues, the berm issues. There's inconsistencies on the site plan. The site plan shows 8-foot berms instead of 20-foot berms.
Sure, that'd be informative.
The question is not whether it's revised. Let me clarify, there's no need.
It's right there.
The problem is that we are referencing the same site plan, and the accusation has been made that we are trying to look at an old site plan. That's not the case. We're looking at the same site plan. If you look at subsequent pages, it says the date completed is 5/17/16. So they're trying to create confusion and trying to say, your arguments are bad because you're looking at a prior site plan. We're not. We're looking at the same one. With regard to the policy that's been submitted, we haven't gone through and we haven't nitpicked and challenged those items in that plan. What we're saying is ultimately the release documents that they've provided are not the complete plan, and to argue that those are is troublesome. They've got a consultant that's done an incomplete analysis. The consultant is yet to visit the site. If you look at the letter, we can go through that letter. The letter from Nixon, he's not done the site visit. He's not done a review of the physical features so as to determine whether they prevent danger or damage to the surrounding property. He's not done a complete review of those standard operating procedures that were submitted. He's not fully reviewed compliance with NRA industry standards. They've provided some minimum safety standards in the letter that should be adopted, and the consultant is the one that said, 8 feet? You mean you're going to have an 8 20-foot berm, you got to have a 20-foot berm out there. That's standard for the industry.
The backdrop was always 20 foot.
Mr. Tatum, please, if you would refrain when you were saying some things that I objected to and thought were misrepresentations. I did not.
Way beyond.
Can I have everyone's attention? Please direct your comments to the dais. Mr. Tatum, please reserve your comments for rebuttal. Thank you.
With respect to that policy, you can look at the Freeport Insider video and take a look at some of the actual events on the site, and those seem to be inconsistent with those safety protocols as well. The other issue that we addressed in the July 11th meeting, which the range project seems to have been dismissive of to some extent, is the noise. We appreciate that they have indicated in their written proposal that the hours would be from 7 to 7, but those do include night hours. We know that the intent, or we can discern from that, then the intent is that some of the shooting will be done after dark. We think that that is something that needs to be considered, whether it be here or at the Planning Commission. But here, though, we do think that it is appropriate for the board to consider the noise ordinance that is in effect. And this noise ordinance, I don't have it in front of me. It's in our materials. It was passed in 2016 or 2014. There's a specific list of exemptions to the provisions in that ordinance, which provide it shall be unlawful and in violation of the section for a person to make, cause, or permit, if within his or her control, the making or causing of any noise disturbance that is plainly audible from within an occupied residence, not the residence of the person making, causing, or permitting the making of causing the noise disturbance. So Mr. Tatum has said this will not be any louder than a hand clap, but hasn't provided anything in the plan that would indicate that to be the case. If you look at the bullets and bones plan that was submitted, the application that was submitted there, they actually do have specific testing with respect to noise that is provided, was provided to the TRC in their compatibility analysis. The bullets and bones recognized residents were located, one residence adjacent to the site and another across the street. They took or made design considerations to minimize this problem by locating the firing ranges as far south of the property as possible. They also did testing of noise levels and recognized that gun decibel levels range from 150 to 160 at close proximity. At the time that they completed their testing, there was no ordinance in place like the one that is in existence now. And they also looked at what types of further sound reductions could be incorporated. They looked at construction of a baffle wall and vegetation just north of the firing line. So these were all issues that were included in the analysis, in the compatibility analysis. Here, this is what the compatibility analysis says. It says the berm should take care of it, and it's already noisy. It's already noisy because of general dynamics. It's already noisy because of roads. It's already noisy because of burrow pits. First of all, with regard to general dynamics, Mr. Tatum indicated that there were explosions hourly every day, I think was the response that he provided in his letter, and he can clarify that if I'm misstating him. That is not accurate. There are individuals here who can testify that the sound is not consistent like that. There are not bombs going off every day out of General Dynamics. And with regard to the burrow pits, you'll hear those, the noise from that is insignificant. It's not heard from these individuals. So I also wanted to point out, and I have to point out this because it's a point that I think Mr. Carpenter will recognize too in this compatibility analysis. The indication is that there was always a shooting range. This is a shooting range. They should know it was a shooting range. There was no shooting range prior to this until they opened the shooting range. So to indicate that they should be used to the noise because there was a shooting range there is inaccurate. What we're asking for there is an analysis that is in line with the statutes that are relevant here, 8823.16. That statute recognizes the issue of local noise ordinances and suggests that that should be taken into consideration in the TRC process, in this process. The statute provides, notwithstanding any other provision of law, a person who operates or uses a sports shooting range in the state shall not be subject to civil liability or criminal prosecution in any matter relating to noise or noise pollution, which results from the operation or use of a sports shooting range, if the range is in compliance with any noise control laws or ordinances adopted by a unit of local government applicable to the range and its operation at the time of construction or initial operation of the range. We don't know whether it's going to comply. There's not even been the first test to determine that. There's just been an allegation that we should be, the surrounding neighbors should be used to the noise. And to the extent that the argument is these can be issues that are addressed in the code proceedings and code enforcement proceedings, these are issues that are expressly provided for in the statute and brought to the attention of the local governments so that they can do that, recognize this, and actually can require compliance with local ordinances. We do appreciate, and I heard some things today which were reiterated in the report. If not, that would be reiterated in the report at some time, the information or the policies with respect to guests. So we do recognize that there are some efforts being made to address these issues. We are not here to say everything they're doing is wrong, which seems to be the implication. We are trying to address issues that are relevant to the individuals who live in the surrounding area and are concerned about the dangers and how this is going to impact their property and their property values. With regard to the timber receipts, I am not aware of specifically what those address. I understand that there is still an environmental issue outstanding. I don't know the scope of that, but as we've stated before, when there are issues outstanding, the application is not complete, should be postponed. I will say that in terms of the staff's analysis, there are still items that the environmental department had raised. One of those was the rule requiring 25% of the high pine scrub vegetation north of the Choctawhatchee Bay to be retained on site. The problem here, to summarize, with respect to these types of calculations, is there's still not a site plan that definitively defines the size of this project. So these calculations are inaccurate. A number of the calculations are inaccurate, and those have been outlined in our letter. With regard to range projects analysis of the timetable versus our analysis of the timetable and our requests to move this to the upcoming TRC meeting. We have a difference of opinion, as I started off, in terms of whether this project should be rejected and a new process started. But considering the timetable, even considering the timetable that Range Project has described in its letter, we would say that the rejection is still appropriate. For example, I'm just going to run through this as quickly as I can. If you look at 45 days from 6/17, which was the last date that there was a completion check on the application, from that they had 45 days. Range Project had 45 days to respond. That would have been by August 2nd. They filed on August 26th. The county then had 10 days to review that, which would have meant that by August 5th, They should have looked at this application as incomplete. We provided them with the information on August 2nd. They did not have the contract with Mr. Queen filed by that date. And the county, as it is admitted, had issues that are not yet resolved. So the package is incomplete. At that point, we've interpreted the code to require that reject the application start anew. We understand there's a code violation pending, and that is the reason that this has been continued and continued and continued, so as to avoid the fines or the initiation of fines. Our goal is to get it done, okay? So we haven't been up in arms about pursuing the code violation because in all actuality, we think that the applicant has stepped back, toned back, or is not conducting the operations out there, at least as they were previously, up to the point of January 5th where they held the event. So that being said, we think the application process should start anew, but at a minimum, we think if we're going to put the code violation and that issue above the processing and following the code provisions, that we think that the postponement is appropriate because it is incomplete and that it has not addressed the safety or has not completed a safety plan that includes the analysis, a complete analysis from Mr. Nixon. It has not addressed the noise issues. The contract was just filed yesterday. There's questions as to the contract, but as I've heard, those are issues that we should not put before the board. So it's a timing issue rather than the validity of the contract. And of course, there are notice issues, and we maintain that others could have been here to speak to the issues and concerns that they have had there been appropriate notice. For those reasons, we would ask that the application be postponed until the next TRC meeting. And I know that Mr. Bennett and Mr. Clark both asked me to let them say a few words.
Thank you. I'm going to address the notice issue. The sign has to indicate the first public hearing at the first public meeting regarding this particular project. It did that. This item has been continued in an open public meeting to a date certain. The minutes that we just approved indicate that today is that meeting that was approved at the last TRC. So I don't validate any of the complaints about the notice issue. I believe the notice has been proper. We provided a courtesy of continuing last month because the sign did have a location that was different. And for the benefit of the public, we did continue that. So notice has been addressed, and that's not appropriate to bring that issue up anymore. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, sir, at the back.
Morning. Thank you for an opportunity to make a comment or two.
Sir,
My name is Steve Mayu.
Thank you.
I'm the last owner of the property.
You
I'm
spell
the
your
villain
last
that
name?
built the range.
Yes, sir. Can you spell your last name for the record?
Mayew. Colonel, U.S. Army, retired. I'm the guy that wrote TC 25-1, How to Build Ranges. I did that for the Department of Defense. So I know how to build ranges. One comment. The operation of the gun range, yeah, before the development order, I had a range there. It did exist.
Mr. Mayu, can you address the dais rather than members of the audience?
I can.
Thank you.
I bought the land in '96. It took about 6 months to do that. I had a little difficulty with Mr. Clark. After I bought the range, I cleaned it up. And in doing that, I got shot at 3 times. So I built a range which meets the state's requirements. I consulted Mr. Bearden at the time. I also consulted folks at county planning. Everybody agreed the range was fine, meets the state's requirements. So that range has been in use.
And when was that?
That was built in 1998.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, let's move on to the next point, the access road. It's always been a road. It was signed off by the county commissioners in 1984. I have a letter that will prove that. Third point, environmental. This is a letter, which you can have, 1997. I tried to get the forestry representative in Walton County to come and give me a plan. We had none at that time. So the Holmes County representative wrote the stewardship plan. In that stewardship plan, I was required to clean up the land because there was a garbage dump in it. So we loaded all the trash. I bought a trailer, a Bobcat, blah, 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 cleaned it up. And yes, the timber was sold. And I'm the guy whose receipts you have. Okay. Lead. We periodically had a church group come out. We screened the lead and we took it to the landfill. Unfortunately, the landfill decided to dump it in the general landfill. So we ceased that and began to sell the lead at recycling. But periodically, the lead was removed. Okay, a contract with Mr. Queen. That was delayed out of necessity. First of all, they would really rather have purchased Mr. Clark's land. Okay, and the only reason was his question of the access. Mr. Clark did not indicate that he would be reasonable relative to that, so they asked Mr. Queen and he agreed. His children disagreed, and that's what caused the delay, although Mr. Queen had already signed a contract agreeing to sell. The berm and grading. The berm and grading was halted for the permit process. There's supposed to be a 25-foot berm back there, and that's in the plan. It's not there because you can't do that until you get permission. Okay. The armor-piercing ammunition. It's not permitted and should not be permitted. Plan has always been to have an RSO out there to make sure that ammunition is not used. In addition, as far as the characteristics of the ammunition, nobody is to shoot a weapon out there unless they know the point they're at and where the rounds will land. They should land in the berm. All the berms should meet the requirements. Noise. No one has complained since 1998 about noise. In fact, the neighbors have all been invited to use the range, and periodically they do. So do members of Fish and Wildlife, and many Walton County people use the range. Now, one last point. I'll give you a break because I know you're sick of hearing this. I did not improve the access to that land on my own. Mr. Bray, your county forester, told me if I wanted forestry and fire services, I had to make sure that access could hold their vehicles. Cost me $7,500 to have all that rock brought in and dirt, but I did it. I did it for this county. And if I seem a little upset about this, I cannot understand why there should be a delay or why all of this stuff should be presented to you, because the bottom line is we've done what was supposed to be done. In addition, ranges continue to develop. If there's a complaint with any changes made on range plans, please understand, if there aren't, something's wrong. You have any questions? Anything I've covered?
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. You're next.
My name is Michael Bennett, Michael Bennett. My family and myself, we own 1,100 acres just north of the Range project. We're approximately 1,500 feet away. We've owned most of that property since 1982. We've had a home, at least one home on the property since 1997. We built another home in 2000. So we're very familiar with the concept that there's been a range here. And I will tell you that if we've ever heard gunshots, it has been very periodic. It's not even vast. This thing that is proposed is a vastly different thing. You know, a gun range with basically commercial use, in my opinion. Anyway, I'm going to try to focus only on the TRC items. I was concerned, obviously, about the notice of public hearing, but that apparently is not an issue anymore. But my big issue is, you know, this has a profound effect on our property. And our property has a future highest and best use. And we're one of the 4 largest pieces of property, to my knowledge, on 331, between 20 and I-10. So, you know, our property is going to have pressure placed on it for development. Or if we allow development, it'll be probably lower density, but it'll still be a significant amount of development. We also have commercial or future commercial property on the highway. We have 1/3 of a mile on Highway 331. Our property goes 1.25 miles to the east, and it goes 1.5 miles from north to south. General Dynamics is our neighbor. General Dynamics, we occasionally hear bombs. We don't hear them every day. You know, we hear their blasts. You know, it may be weeks and weeks before we hear one. And then one day we may hear 10 of them. So to us, that's not an issue as compared to a, you know, percussive type all day long situation that you'd have with a gun range. So anyway, the major TRC item is, you know, the failure to comply with all the requirements of your committee. We're very concerned about the safety plan or the inadequacy of the safety plan as it is proposed. You know, we do live on our property, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling to consider that you may have, you know, a shot come through the woods. And of course, we have the General Dynamics situation where when Range Project did have an event there in January, General Dynamics called the cops, called the Walton County Sheriff's Department, and said they had damage to their buildings. They had gun shots flying through the woods while their employees were out there. And the Range Project to General Dynamics is, so their buildings are 3,002 feet away, 3,200 feet away, excuse me. By comparison, the Range Project is about 1,500 or 1,600 feet from 331, which is the backbone of this county. It's the, you know, it's the transportation backbone of the county. We've all seen how much it's grown. Just since the road's been 4-lane, the traffic is, you know, 17,500 plus cars a day. So, you know, it seems like a wildly inappropriate location to have something of this scale. Now, none of us have any problem with a rudimentary range like existed before. That's just part of living in the country. People occasionally want to shoot a gun. It's their right to do it. We don't have any problem with that. And also, I will bring up the fact that, you know, we're not saying that people can't shoot a gun, and I've heard that comment before. All we're saying is the county has the ability to set parameters on that. You know, I can't go shoot a gun in Kelly Plantation or Watercolor, or, you know, I can't shoot a gun in many pieces of property in this county. But if I have an estate residential with 5 acres, I can shoot a gun. I can have a gun range. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that's pretty.
Can I ask you a couple of questions just
Yeah.
for my own edification?
Sure.
You mentioned you're 1,500 feet or so. Is that your property line, or is that where you live?
It is our property line.
So your property is not contiguous with
We're not
the
contiguous
subject
to,
property.
but our southern border is with the fire department and General Dynamics. But my point is, in the future, even though we don't have residences there now, we could easily, with our general agricultural, have 100 residences on our property. And that's with Eglins. Air Force bases, restrictions they would like to see. If we had a higher use like state residential, we could probably have 200 residences there. So in the future, this gun range is going to be an issue in this county, and it's a big Pandora's box if we open this thing up. There's going to be problems for the county for years and years, I think, and it's problems all of you will have to deal with, and the county commissioner will have to deal with. And like I said, if they wanted to have what they have had before, supposedly that would be fine because it's a very infrequent use. Anyway, I would also like to point out a couple things. Let's see. Basically, you know, this whole project came about in reverse. The range project elected to go start illegal construction and development without any kind of permitting or minor development order, major development order, whatever. They went out there and did their own thing. Now they're asking forgiveness retroactively. Or they're asking for approval retroactively, you know, to make it all fit. And we think that's very wrong. And we think that they shouldn't be rewarded for that. You know, they shouldn't be, they shouldn't be allowed to set the rules for the county. And also, we're very happy to see that the county is probably going to put the $250 a day penalty into effect next month if this whole thing doesn't get resolved. That's very fair. I also have with me, even though everyone is aware of this, the last time we went to the county property appraiser, which was, I believe, the 1st of July, we had a new map printed out of our plat and the plats around it. So it shows the fully completed gun range on the site. Now, 3 weeks prior to that, we went to the county property appraiser's office and got this map.
Yes, sir. That could be that we've got new aerials that have been
I
uploaded.
understand that. I understand
The
that.
previous ones were 2016. We were very aware of the amount of development that's occurred on the
understand that.
property. The code board has already acted on that, and that's
Right.
why we're here.
Yeah, I understand.
They've been directed by Walden County
Right.
to seek development order approval and to
Sure.
cease all activity in the meantime.
I understand that, and I appreciate that.
And it's my understanding that since the January 5th event, they have ceased activity out there.
Yeah, I believe they have ceased
We're
activity.
not
since
aware
that
that
day.
any further construction has occurred since then.
Well, I would invite all of you to visit the site and make that determination for yourself. It's not an abstract issue, certainly not an abstract issue for us as a affected party very near the property. And also, I'd like to bring up one more thing is, let's see, my notes. Rose was out there yesterday.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. I also urge the Technical Review Committee to look at the recent contingent approval of a range in Lake County, Florida, which happened in December of 2018. Lake County elected to protect its citizens by stipulating significantly enhanced safety measures and also addressing noise and quality of life issues above and beyond what was necessary. And I think that's something the county definitely needs to consider. And the TRC is the first step in that.
Do you have any information for us this morning with regard to that?
I will absolutely give it to you. I don't have it here, but I believe Ms. O'Keefe has it.
Sure, we'd
and
be
it's
happy to
certainly
receive that from you.
certainly easily accessible. But I do thank you for your time. I thank you for all you do. I understand you have a pretty thankless job here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Clark?
My name is Mike Clark. I own a property in between 331 and the gun range. Gosh, I don't know where to start. There's been a lot of claims made, so many promises made. It's just unbelievable. To me, it's like a nightmare. I had plans for my property for years. Me and my family owned the property where the gun range is, where Mr. Mayhew has his property on 331. I know what's been going on that property. To say that there's been a gun range there for years is just absolutely not true. If you call 2 sandbags full of sand with some paper targets on it in a little covey bay that he used to mix concrete to make concrete stone to build a retention wall at the bottom of his property. If that's a gun range, then there's hundreds of them in Walton County. The shooting was very sporadic. Every now and again on the Sundays, him and his son would go back there and shoot the pistols. Might last 20, 30 minutes. One summer, there were some church people that did come out. It wasn't every Sunday, every once in a while. But to call it an existing, memorializing a gun range, is just not true. As far as the easement, I'm a land manager for a land trust. We do silviculture. We have registered tree farms. He says he has logging receipts. I've never had agriculture or anybody say we had to have a certain kind of road to harvest timber. I don't know where that came from. They're trying to make me out like I'm the villain of this whole thing, when all I'm trying to do is protect my property. My property is general commercial. It's going to severely affect my property. As far as the weapons and the ammunition, the gun range is, less than 320 feet. It's less than 1,300 feet from Highway 331. They've already shot up General Dynamics. It's like 3,000 meters away. Other than the event, they've had classes out there, pistol classes, different kinds of classes. Concerned about the lead contamination. There's Freeport well right next door being put in right now. There's the South Walton Wells. It's about 2 miles away. From what I understand, they're supposed to shoot in the berms, but if you look at their photographs, they're shooting into the dirt, placing targets on the ground, shooting the dirt. I don't know how they're going to do the cleanup on that. And my whole point is, I don't know what benefit this is going to be for the county. There's been studies done how property values are affected by gun ranges. That's going to be lost revenue when it goes in, if it goes in.
Mr. Clark, do you have any of those studies to present as evidence this morning?
No, I don't, not with me. But I can provide you with them.
You're certainly welcome to, but if we don't have them before us, we can't consider them.
Okay. Well, with all that said and done, they've been using my easement. It's my land. Just because they have an easement doesn't mean they can do whatever they want with it. They took out all my trees, brought a bunch of concrete in there and dumped it, put gumbo clay on top of it, then put sand on it, put a new culvert in. Now all the sand's washed off, all the water's running on my property. The culvert's half full of sand. The gumbo clay is exposed again. And so now they at a meeting said they bought this for my benefit. They bought this new access for my benefit. They didn't do it for my benefit. They did it because the easement's only 33 feet wide, and they can't put a 2-lane road in, with retention on 33 feet. But now they've left me with a mess. Took out all my trees. Speaking with Mr. Queen, I spoke to Mr. Queen this morning. Just because they have a signed contract doesn't make it a legal contract, Mac. There has to be earnest money down to make it a legal contract. There's no earnest money put down on that contract. Mr. Queen told me to call him after this meeting today because he was under the impression they would get their permits for the project today. And he said he would sign it after the meeting today. You don't have a legal contract, Matt. There's no earnest money down on it. It's just a predated contract that wasn't executed, that they executed right before this meeting. So how can you even move forward if they don't even have a legal contract on this easement? They claim they have a letter from the person that lives closest to them. I visited Mr. Queen. I went in his house. You couldn't even talk. The noise was so loud. He told me he didn't really want to sell. He's 78 years old. He's got diabetes. He said, I don't want to sell. But he said, I can't take the gun noise. I can't take it anymore. So there's a lot of things have been said, and I urge this committee to not move forward with this thing until we get all the facts. You know, there's safety, there's noise, there's how it's going to affect surrounding properties. Once they get approval, there's nothing else you can do. There's no way you can't control what they do out there. They can do whatever they want. So it's important that we get this right the first time. We need to cover all the bases. So if from the beginning they would have played by the rules, Greenberry or not, did more than just go out there and take a few trees down. It was massive excavation. They dug up 37 acres, dug it up with heavy equipment. Just the way the whole situation's handled, I think we need to be careful. Make sure everything's done correctly. And about all I have to say about it.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing no other, is that a hand in the back there? Or? No one else apparently wishes to speak on this matter. Mr. Tatum, if you'd like rebuttal.
Just a couple of things. I'm going to try to parse this down as quickly as possible. As far as the issue with not providing the type of weapons, ammo that's going to be fired at the range, Clark-Nixon did not need that info in order to make their determinations. They can look at what range is there, like what the bays look like, and know the type of ammunition and type of guns that will be used on those spots. That's, you know, just from course of dealing with this, with designing ranges. So that wasn't something that was necessary to be provided for them to make their determination that this does comply. And the letter says the site plan does comply with the NRA source book's recommendations. The only changes that may be made out there as a result of Clark-Nixon's site visit will not change the site plan. It will just be little recommendations they make as to how to set something up, where to set the targets. This is not anything to do with the actual technical review committee's prerogatives that when Clark-Nixon goes out there. Now, as far as the actual design of the berms and the layout of the bays, yes, totally within the purview of this committee, and that's what they did and they looked at. The berm height details show the correct berm heights. There's not an issue there. We've dealt with the shooting range. It did exist prior. I did want to make sure y'all understood. There was been a lot of talk about this easement. That easement's not in play anymore. That was the reason that this contract issue came up, is because we bought or are in the process of buying another piece of property to access our property in order to get away from this easement issue. So, I mean, yeah, the easement's still being used to access it right now because there's no other way to get to it until this road gets put in on the other property. But we have a valid right for ingress and egress on that property. You know, if there's some question as to whether or not we're using it too much, that's something to be debated in a court, not here. What else do we have? Mr. Bennett's house is actually over a mile away from the most northeastern corner of our property. So it's a pretty good distance there. Not Michael Bennett's, I'm sorry. Dick Bennett's, your dad's house, sorry. Is it? Okay. Well, okay. I will check that out too, to see the distance on it. I'll measure to it. I couldn't see it in the aerial, so that's the reason I didn't, yeah.
But that house is at least 1,500 feet away from the subject site. Thank you.
As far as
Property
330.
line, you indicated the property line was 1,500 feet.
A particular home, but it is significant.
You indicated in your testimony that your property was approximately 1,500 feet away from the property line. So if there were a house on the property, it would have to be at least 1,500 feet away also. That was just my clarification.
I understand.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, as far as 331 goes, there are only a few bays that are even pointed towards the west. Those are small arms bays. There will be no issue of any small arms fire getting out and striking 331, but just because of the berming, but also because of the firing line placement and where the targets will be in a down sloping position from where the firing platforms are. You know, I can't guarantee some idiot wouldn't go out there and do something. I know that's what you're all thinking, but that's what we have our range safety officer there for. The range safety officer will be overseeing the shooters. We're very open to recommendations or requests from the public. We try to have public meetings. We tried to schedule one through Mr. Bennett's dad. No one would meet with us. We were going to have it at his dad's hotel there at I-10 in Defuniak, and no one would want to meet with us. They didn't want to talk. They're totally against it rather than giving us, you know, their concerns and their recommendations until we get into a public forum. Just for reference, you know, we are a significant distance, 1,300 feet from 331. Bullets and Bones is only 200 feet from Highway 90. Just as an idea of the proximity to a major highway. We did not shoot up General Dynamics. There was no one on our property shooting the day those bullets were found. Our contention is that it came from people who were firing down the power line that runs to the south of our property. We do have a letter from, I don't remember her name now, but there's one of the letters of recommendation for this project also references the shooting that goes on along that power line. And she's willing to sign an affidavit saying that she'd heard shots that day. We figured that's where the shots came from. No way to be certain where they came from, but we just know there was no one on our property shooting that day. We did speak with General Dynamics recently to their general counsel, David Roller. He told us that rogue fragments from their bomb explosions can travel up to 3,300 meters, and they travel at 22,000 feet per second. So if that's the case, I don't even know how you begin to try to contend with that. And just as a comparison, you know, we're taking huge precautions to make sure that we don't have any rounds leaving our property. But that's a potential issue just coming from General Dynamics, and they've been there for years, and I don't know of any reported problems with them. That's the gist of my argument and rebuttal. If you've got any other questions, I will take them.
Thank you. You reviewed the Bullets and Bones application?
Have I reviewed?
The only other firing range this county has
Right.
approved since state law changed a few years ago.
Mhm.
Did they provide decibel test information?
They did provide some decibel test information. They did. I'm not sure at what stage in the process they provided that, and we do intend to provide that to you. It's just a matter of getting Clark Nixon to the site to perform the tests, and we're talking about a national corporation that's they're teaching an NRA conference right now. Those guys will be on our site, and we'll do the testing, and we'll provide the information prior to the Planning Commission. We will have that report prior to the Planning Commission. The Bullets and Bones one, I don't know how they came up with their readings. I don't know if they just went out there with a decibel meter and fired some guns or what they did, but there's no indication in that compatibility analysis how they came up with those numbers. They provided some numbers. We're going to provide you with a report from a nationally recognized, reputable gun range designer. Okay. Anything else?
Question about the environmental assessment, the revision to that, and the preservation plan.
Want to address that? Sure.
Can you hear me? Yeah. The environmental assessment we talked
Please
about.
state your name for the
Yeah,
record.
Ed Stanford, STANFORD with CORE. The question was regarding timbering. We got the letter on Monday. Our environmental guys are revising the language. They revised it, but there's still a little bit of an inconsistency with the figure. So we're just addressing that. But as we stated today, and in these plans, it's actually a little more conservative than what's actually going to be required per county requirements. So to me, it's a minor issue, a clarification issue, but we're addressing it.
Okay, when do you expect to have that resubmitted?
You know, it may be today. We've got the verbiage, we just didn't get the revised figures.
Okay, thank you.
Beyond that, we did supply the receipts from where that land was timbered, 3 different occasions, 3 different years. I know from the receipts, you can't tell exactly what was done when and where, but it was on that property. Those are Mr. Mayhew's receipts. His name's on them. He testified that it had been timbered. So the clearing that was done there was through agricultural purposes, and I believe that's exempt from that clearing requirement. Is that correct?
Is this a registered farm?
Don't know about that.
The reason we asked for the information is because just looking at the aerials, obviously there was timbering done there, based on our observation from the information available to us. The environmental assessment did not indicate that, and it very well be that there is an agricultural or silvicultural exemption available with regard to the vegetation that was removed. That's what we're asking about. To update the environmental assessment so we have an accurate determination of what preservation requirements might apply to this particular project and where those requirements are. Now, whether or not that affects site plan or not, I don't know. But until we have that information, we couldn't approve a site plan.
Could you approve it condition, go ahead and move us out of here to PC, and as long as it's contingent upon it being taken care of, and then if the site plan were to change, then we have to come back? But it being such a minor issue that will most likely be taken care of within a couple of days. Well, I say a minor issue, it's only a minor issue if it comes out in our favor, but.
Well, and just
I
to
think
speak to that
that's-
it should be reduced, if anything. It's not going to get worse. It's going to get better for us, just when we clarify this. What we have in our plans in our report right now is more conservative than it should be.
Do we have the preservation identified on a preservation plan?
Yes.
You reviewed that, Bob?
Correct, Mr. Chair. As we spoke yesterday, the same comments are made about clarification, and it appears that with the EA that it went up in acreage requirement, and that's why we made the call yesterday for clarification. It is the only outstanding comment. Staff feels that it could be addressed if the board agrees before, and make it a condition before it moves to the planning commission.
I would interject that adding the 11 acres without a doubt requires that the preservation acreage goes up. That generally makes sense. If you have to provide 25% conservation of the entire property. However, that property on the assessment shows that is much more than 75% in its natural state.
Mr. Chair, there was confusion in the environmental assessment. It wasn't clear, and that is why our environmental planner made the comments he did. It needs to be clarified so we know exactly, and hence his comments from August 6th.
Given that this is an item that I don't believe anybody else in the TRC would look at except for planning, I may be wrong, Will, you might. But would it be acceptable to go ahead and move us out? Let us address the issue. If the issue is not addressed to planning's standards, then we come back.
When do we plan to have the noise information?
It will be before planning commission, before the turn-in date on planning commission, but I honestly don't have a specific date for you yet.
Subject to this board's recommendation to move the project forward, the earliest planning commission day would be September 12th.
Correct.
And the advertising date for that planning commission meeting is August 22nd.
Well, that's convenient, isn't it?
Is the day after the next TRC meeting.
I'll leave that in your ballpark. I do believe that it would be best for everyone if we just went ahead and moved this on and got to planning commission. Let us handle that in between now and the next TRC, updating you on the info for environmental. But let's go ahead and get it slated to get to PC so that the real gunslinging battle can begin, I guess. And you don't have to hear it again.
Thank you for that consideration.
I know you wanted to hear my opinion on that.
And it was as I anticipated.
Yeah, figured.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that's it for right now.
All right, thanks.
Chair, can I add that if you are inclined to move it forward conditionally, I would like to add that everything has to be submitted to us satisfactory before, the day before the advertisement date. We can't be getting it in that afternoon, reviewed and advertised, and then run into the continuation issue again.
Absolutely, I agree.
Can we make it, if you're leaning that way, can we make it that it's a week before the advertisement? I can't, as you know, we can't get it last minute. It's not the only project and it's not the only sensitive review. Or there's October's PC.
Well, a couple of things. Just in summary, we've heard a number of comments, both pro and con. There have been a number of issues raised. I think by and large, most of those have been satisfactorily addressed. There is a long history on this particular development. It was elevated to a major development review. It would normally be a minor development, but based on the safety concerns, I made the determination to make this a major development. And this has been a painful process to get to this point. I think the project, based on public comment, has been made a much better project, a much safer project. We are not regulating the shooting of guns. I just want that to be clear and on the record. What we are regulating is the siting of a business that happens to be a firing range in a land use category that clearly allows a firing range as a primary use. However, but because of the nature of safety, we've elevated this to a much larger process than would be normal. We have continued this to provide the applicant an opportunity to address comments from the public a number of times. And we've got quite a bit of interest on both sides of this particular project, as evidenced by the number of people that are here today, the number of comments we've received both for and against this particular development. Do I have a particular preference? Whether or not there is a shooting range in Walton County? I do not. I do not own a gun. I know lots of folks that do, and it's certainly the right of everyone in this room, subject to meeting the appropriate requirements to own and fire guns. There are certain limitations, and our effort in this particular regard is to make sure that the public impacts are adequately addressed. That does not mean they would be eliminated. This particular location, and I think most everyone in this room will agree, at least those folks that have been here for more than a couple of weeks, is adjacent to the site of the largest impact noise generator in Walton County. General Dynamics, where they develop and test bombs on a micro level and move them across the street to the Eglin Reservation to blow them up on a full scale. The mother of all bombs was developed in Walton County, the largest bomb that man has ever made. I've grown up in Defuniak Springs waiting for the 11 o'clock bomb explosion on a regular basis. It's one of those things that folks in our county, and I'm not sure how far north of Defuniak Springs this particular explosion activity resonates, but I've grown up with it. It's part of keeping our country safe. As a defense contractor that's been there a long time, they've operated in a very safe manner. But I know that if I lived closer to them, it would be a much bigger part of my life. But certainly noise is one of those things that we've come to expect from the General Dynamics site. And it is impulse noise. It's not continuous noise. We do have a noise ordinance that speaks to impulse noise, and this particular development would be subject to the appropriate portion of that noise ordinance, just like any other kind of business would be. There are a few technical details that we do need to correct in the application based on comments. We've discussed the environmental assessment and the confirmation of the requirement for preservation as it applies to this particular property and this particular site. We've got a question about the calculation of the site acreage, which I think is a minor technical detail that's easily corrected. But that speaks to preservation also. So we want to make sure those numbers are absolutely accurate. If there's a preservation requirement here, then we need to know exactly what that is and where those areas are going to be preserved. If there's a proposed buyout of some portion of that preservation, we need to know exactly where that buyout is going to occur, and we need to have accurate acreage calculations so that that buyout can be accurately calculated in accordance with county staff. The Auditor General has been very kind to remind us of that requirement over the past 4 years. And I'm here to say that we are doing a very good job of that now, and we want to continue to do that, but that's based on the accuracy of the information provided by the applicant. So we would like that information clarified for that particular purpose as we update the environmental assessment and the landscape preservation plan if necessary. There's been comments about the possibility that berm heights might need to be adjusted related to the safety plan. I can't tell this morning whether or not those things have already occurred or not, but I would like confirmation that they are on the current plan that's presently before us. And I think the June 25 or 26 date was mentioned as far as submittal of the most recent plan. I can't tell for sure if that's what's in our package. My eyes just aren't that good this morning. But I am aware that one has been submitted through Bob, our project manager. We have a request, or actually I'm going to make a request as the chairman that you do provide decibel information, at least similar to what we considered on the Bullets and Bones project, the only other major development for a firing range. And we would like that information since it relates to compatibility and noise as soon as possible. And provide whatever level of documentation you feel is appropriate to support the decibel levels that you'll report back to us. I mean, certainly noise is a consideration, and we want to make sure we've at least addressed all of the issues and with at least the depth that we did on the Bullets and Bones project. So we provide consistency between similar applications and similar applicants. You do make a good point that location is much closer to a U.S. highway. It's also much closer to private residences. But they also do fire a cannon at that location from time to time. I mean, gun ranges have an inherent component of noise. Whether or not that particular noise is compatible with development around this particular site or not is certainly something that we're going to consider. Without having some decibel readings to indicate what that sound is going to be, we really can't make that determination that we've at least considered that. And I think that's a valid point that has been raised by objectors in this particular case. And given that we do have additional information that we requested, I'm going to suggest that we continue this to the next TRC. That's August 21st at 8:30 in this location. That will not delay the advertising for the Planning Commission should this board choose to recommend the project move forward. However, this morning I'm not comfortable moving it out of TRC with these important issues, asking for some additional information. This has been a painful process for both the applicant, the neighborhood, and for staff, quite honestly. We probably had this project in review longer than anything else we've had in review that I can recall. Objectors make a good point that this is ideally taking longer than it normally would. But since the code board has found this development in violation and has directed them as a remedy to seek the appropriate development order, they have been continuing in good faith to do that. I see no reason to take this back to code board for fine assessment. I just don't think it's appropriate. What I do think is appropriate is that we get to the end of this process, both for the benefit of the neighborhood, the county, and most importantly, for the benefit of the applicant who is entitled to apply for this particular use on this site and to receive approval, providing they can meet the requirements of the Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code. It will have public hearings at the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commission once this board makes a recommendation. But I don't think we're ready to make that recommendation today. So I'd entertain a motion to continue to May 21st at 8:30 a.m. in this location.
Mr. Chair, can I add one condition to that recommendation? That I have to have, if I open a business, all documentation in one submittal on the 12th of July.
August.
Or August, I'm sorry, 12th of August. It's got to be loaded on the 14th. I mean, we're back to getting.
They'll have 5 days. They'll have 5 days to submit the information. Can you get it to us by the 13th? I would ask you to exert your best efforts to do that. And with that, I'll entertain the motion.
Make a motion to continue till the next TRC meeting with the stipulation of the deadline that you just presented.
So moved.
We have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed likewise? Hearing none, this item is continued to the next TRC meeting on August 21st at 8:30 a.m. in this location. This is the public notice of the continuance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, can we take a quick break in between our projects?
Yeah, we can take a quick 5-minute recess.
It's not on the block, it's on the cover sheet. some cool story, like you were out there rescuing somebody, and a shark tried to bite you?
Yeah, that is my cool story. I have a cool story. Three-story building.
Yeah, right.
Two-story building, and I had triplets coming out the stairs.
We can call the meeting back to order. Thank you. We will move to the next item on our agenda this morning, and that is the Shunk Gulley Phase II. This is a minor development on our application reviewed by Bob Baronti. Bob, if you'll briefly introduce it for us.
Major development or application by Donald Associates Consulting Engineers on behalf of Clint and David Jones requesting approval to construct a building expansion and associated improvements to operate the Shunk Gulley restaurant on 1.82 plus or minus acres with the future land use of village mixed use and the zoning of village mixed use. The project is located approximately from the intersection of Highway County 38 and South County Highway 393, approximately 250 feet, and the entrance to the property is on the right, and it's identified by the parcel numbers in your staff report. Chair, late yesterday, at the end of the day, I received a request from the ownership team to continue this project to the September 18th TRC. So that they can see what the board determines to do with the commercial setback in the land development.
That's the request. I think we're happy to continue to September 18th. Do we have a motion to continue this project to the September 18th TRC at 8:30 a.m. in this location?
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Likewise? Okay, hearing none, this item is continued to the September 18th TRC, 8:30 a.m. in this location. This is the public notice of that continuance. That moves us to item number 6, the Sweetwater Lane RV Park. This minor development's been reviewed by Kelly Frymeyer.
No.
I'm sorry, Tim Brown. Sorry, I don't have my glasses this morning.
Thank you. This is a minor development or application submitted by Jenkins Engineering on behalf of Denise Holbert, requesting approval to develop an RV park and associated infrastructure in 3 phases on 1.82 acres with the future land use of rural residential and a zoning of rural village. It's located at 135 Sweetwater Lane, which is just north of, no, I guess it would be east of 331 South. There's a number of planning comments, some environmental comments, a number of engineering comments. As of the date of the report, I didn't have any fire comments, and there's a comment from Public Works. So with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Morning, everyone. Sorry. Jamie Eubanks, EUBANKS. We have reviewed the comments, spoken with staff regarding 1 or 2 of them, and plan to address them. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Thank you, Jamie. We have a recommended motion?
Yes, I don't see any of the comments being deal killers, so.
Can I possibly say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Your site plan that you have, we, at the health department, haven't actually seen this yet. But the RV lots are required to be a minimum of 1,200 square feet, and it doesn't look like it's meet that. And if you're still gonna be on septic, the flow per RV lot is 75 gallons, so you're talking about a lot of gallonage, a large septic system. And I'm not sure that you've got an area set out for that. And as I recall, the original system that you had out there was a mound system, larger than your normal in-ground system. You want to make sure that you've got adequate space to accommodate those. I didn't see that on your site.
Yes, ma'am. A couple of the comments actually did relate to health department approval from planning, I believe. It is our intention to go ahead and actually set up a meeting with you to discuss these things. Part of the reason for the phasing plan is to specifically set aside areas for septic tanks. So that is one item we can discuss. At the end of the day, there's a dry sewer line
Yes.
proposed for future. Not all the lots would be on, not all the pads would be on in the beginning, but certainly health department is one item we have to address, absolutely.
Well, like I said, the main concern, just looking at that, is making sure that you actually have adequate space to put a 1,200 square foot lot for each of those.
Yes. Thank you.
We received health department comment?
I called Crystal up, and we haven't seen this one yet.
Okay.
So I'll be looking at that when I get back to the office.
And South Walton Fire is not the right agency for this one?
Correct. This is what I emailed you about.
Have you gotten that?
I did review it and I uploaded it to, over the weekend, of the Citizen Center.
Do you have any comments?
There were about 3 separate projects, and I don't remember if there was anything specifically with this one. If it is on Citizen Serve, if I did have comments.
Okay.
We got a lot of outstanding comments. Do we have an idea of when you might be able to resubmit?
It'll take some time, Mac. I don't have an objection to a continuance. I've already spoken with the owners and explained that I would request one today.
What would you like to request a continuance to?
Anytime not on the range project. Not on that agenda.
Well, I'm certainly sensitive to that, Senator.
You know, to be honest, Mac, to address the comments, to give staff time to review them, I think rather than the next meeting, probably the following, the 1st of September would be fine. Or not the 1st of September, whatever that meeting is.
What date that is?
September 4th?
I don't have, since it's a minor, I mean, we have to satisfy staff either way, so we're not really waiting for an agenda for planning commission or anything, so that would be perfectly fine.
Right, and I appreciate that, and just for confirmation, this is the remedy for a code complaint. So,
That's my understanding.
we probably want to keep it at TRC until we've satisfied all the comments. But appreciate your willingness to do that. I'll entertain a motion to continue this project to the September 4th Technical Review Committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. in this location.
Matt, can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Do we need to hear from public? Because I've been told there's a number of.
Absolutely. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
we'll stay the motion for this moment. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this particular topic? Yes, sir. Come to the podium, please. State your name for the record and spell your last name if you would.
My name is Stuart Weddington, Weddington. I am representing the residents of Sweetwater Lane. There's a couple things on this development that we have questions about. One was, how can they stick a commercial development inside an enclosed subdivision was one of them that, and I was told it because it meets the land use. And I still don't understand how we can do that, but I'm sure that y'all will address that and tell me. One of our concerns is the egress and ingress off of 331 onto Sweetwater Lane. Sweetwater Lane is an older road, and if you're carrying a trailer or a car, or if you're just trying to turn off of 331, even though it's been 4-laned, you run into the issue that you're not going to make it unless you go into the adjacent lane. You're going to hit the apron, and so we're on how that is going to be addressed. Another thing is because of the if it is approved, the deterioration of the road. I know that when the Sweetwater Lane was paved, it was one of the older roads paved, and it's got large aggregates in it and not a real firm base on there. So that's one of our concerns, even though we know that the county maintains it, but it's just that point. It's not made to handle heavy traffic. One of the things that we're concerned about is the safety of the community that's back there. And when I talk about safety, I'm not talking about just the safety of the tenants. I'm talking about safety as far as with increased traffic, there are no sidewalks. So people are walking on the road. Somebody could get hit, or, we walk our dogs on the aprons, and that was another thing about pets, both sanitation and safety, and light pollution and noise. I mean, they said, it's really reading everything. It's not been really addressed, and those are some of our concerns. One of the concerns that I have, or one of the things that I'm questioning, is it's requiring a 20-foot buffer on the west side of the property. Well, if there's a 20-foot green space buffer, that's going to almost take one side of the property out of use. If I'm looking at the way the site plan is laid out, there's and I understand y'all kind of answered the question before, that there's already a violation of the site because it's not used. They have people who are living there in trailers and it's not a paid RV site. It doesn't have a license to do that. And I realize that this is probably trying to bring it into approval. One of the things is, and again, we asked about, I'm concerned about the public services. I know I read everything, and believe it or not, guys, I'm probably one of the few people that have read your 95-page of land use to try to find out what's going on. But it said that there has to be a 5-year commitment, or within 5 years, for public access services by the city of Freeport for sewer.
Yes, sir. That's the reason they're going to be laying dry lines for sewer.
Okay.
The sewer is coming down 331.
All right.
From the city of Freeport.
I understand that. I've been waiting for that for the last 10 years. Yes. Okay. So You know, that was one of my concerns, is when the health department said, how could they support such a large contingent of RVs with the sewer system they have now, the septic system that they have now? One of the questions on the site plan was that, that it was, will the existing gravel access along the western boundary of parcel 1 remain? It is my understanding that gravel boundary actually belongs to Clay Blizzard, and it is a deeded easement to the residents of Sweetwater Lane, and is not to be used as a driveway. It's a deeded walkway. And so right now it's in violation because it's being used as a driveway. So we're kind of at odds about that, you know. And the last thing really I have to say about it is that I can tell you all 10 residential homeowners in that area are vehemently against this project. We feel it does not meet the standards of the community. All right.
Thank you. Do you have any evidence of that particular pedestrian easement that you'd like?
I actually have it on my deed that it's a deeded easement, and then I do have I will have a notarized copy from the landowner stating that for permission to fence it off to be so it actually separates the property from that part of the subdivision. If I said that right. Okay, the property that's at the
could you describe where that easement is for us?
Let me see.
Pull up the site plan, you'll see it very well.
Right.
See that road to the west of the property?
Yes.
That is, yes, sir, that is it.
Yeah, and the GIS shows that as right-of-way. Now, I don't know that that's true, but if you click on the GIS, it shows that it's right-of-way, just like Sweetwater Lane.
I spoke with Mr. Strickland at Public Works, and he assured me that that is not part of the right-of-way of Sweetwater Lane. And when I spoke with Mr. Blizzard, Clay Blizzard, who owns the property, he said it is still part of his family's estate.
Mac, if I can maybe clarify this for help for everybody. With regards to that gravel area, it is not a portion of this project. And we do show the existing connection that comes into the property that you might be able to see on the site plan. We left that because it's there in place now. People have been using it to turn around. If we need to disconnect it, we can disconnect it. No objection to that.
What's your request?
That it be disconnected.
And this is on the west side of
The west side, yes, sir.
side.
We don't want that to be, say, okay, we're going to reuse that as part of the 20-foot landscape easement, which it can't be. It's not part of his property.
It appears to be off-site.
Yeah, it's off-site, right.
And therefore, it could not be used for anything.
All right.
And if that is your request, that be disconnected, I would expect that to address the compatibility, they're likely going to have, subject to this project ever getting approved,
Right.
that they would be building some type of masonry wall on the west side of the property there,
Okay.
from a compatibility standpoint.
All right. Thank you.
I mean, would that be something that you would be interested in them doing?
Yes, I would. I truly believe, and I think I can speak for everybody out here, a masonry fence would be great. At least 6 foot.
There are some additional opportunities in the updated Land Development Code that would provide for alternatives to simply a 20-foot landscape buffer.
Right.
Where that distance could be reduced to provide both some landscaping and a masonry wall to reduce the 20-foot width.
Right.
I don't know that they've proposed to take advantage of that compatibility opportunity in the present submittal, but should this project move forward, that would certainly be my recommendation. And it has to be a masonry wall. It can't be a fence.
Okay.
Can't be a shadow box or vinyl fencing that might look nice. That just doesn't meet compatibility requirements.
Understand.
And one thing a masonry wall would also do was help provide a sound barrier.
True.
And certainly light, headlights, those kinds of things.
Right.
But we'll certainly consider that. Any other comments or suggestions?
Not at this time. I'm sure you've given me a little bit of time to think more, but, we'll wait to see how they address the issues that are already outstanding on it.
Okay.
All right?
Thanks,
Thank
sir.
you.
We discussed that it could also be either brick or stone.
Yes, I mean, those are alternate materials, but either way, it would be a masonry structure that would provide significant sound barrier and light barrier compatibility measures. Anyone else wish to speak on this particular topic? Yes, sir.
I'm Jonathan White, W-H-I-T-E. I live directly across from the proposed property. We get the water, which is a finger off of Mallet Bayou. My big concern, there's many of us here that live on Waterside Lane. Our biggest concern is the noise, the theft, the other things that are going to happen with more people in the area.
Have you been experiencing those things up until this point?
Yes, sir. In fact, just recently I had all 6 of my rods and reels stolen from my dock.
And you live directly across the Sweetwater Lane?
Directly across from the property on Waterside Lane.
Across the water.
Yes.
Okay, across the water.
So we all have some big concerns about that, especially the noise levels that's going to incur. You've already addressed the sewer issue that we had on our list and the current boat ramp. What is going to happen with that?
I would imagine it would still remain open the way it is today.
Well, if you put that wall up, it won't be, so.
If you could come to the podium so we could get your comments on the record, please.
As we were as he brought up about the boat ramp that's there, recent survey actually shows that the boat ramp or the ramp itself is on that public or on that easement piece of property. It was put on there erroneously, I guess, by years ago when this came before the Planning Commission to make a marina there. It was actually encroached on the public, or I should say that access easement. If you look on the site plan, you'll see how it lays out. His road that he had come in makes a sort of a looping and goes in. The boat ramp, the concrete actually into the water is on the easement and actually on a piece of private property. So,
which is not the subject property.
Which is not the subject property. So that would be, I guess, what we do with that easement, if it's, from what I understand about the easement, and when I was speaking to the owner, it was built so the people on the far side of the subdivision would have access to the water, whether it be fishing or just to go down to the water's edge, so they wouldn't have to cross over on somebody else's property. And so that's what we still want to continue that as for the people of that community that can still go down there to the water, and they don't have to ask their neighbor, hey, can we come walk on your property to go to the water's edge?
Oh, I completely understand that. Jamie, are you familiar with where the boat ramp is with regard to this easement?
So I believe what they're indicating, if you look at the site plan as you have before you, Mac, and obviously you don't have the existing conditions in front of you, what happens now, I'll speak loudly. What happens now, you can see this kind of makes a bit of a turn into the property. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it does almost a bit of a U.
Correct.
So it's on a portion of the roadway, the gravel is on the applicant's property right now.
Correct. This is a recent survey of it. It's right next to, or what we're talking about, the survey of this egress ingress walkway. And you can see where they have the, mind if I come up here and show you?
Yes, if you may have to borrow your glasses.
You can see where this is the easement, and this is where the concrete actually runs on this side through here, and this belongs to this property owner. And the entire ramp is actually on that 15-foot easement.
On this easement.
On this easement, yes, sir, right here.
So that is not the ramp there?
The ramp, this right here, the ramp goes right through here.
It appears that most of it's getting removed with this,
Right.
with this development.
Yeah, with this
They'll have to
this
remove
is
most of
actually
it.
the development question on this.
So the ramp's not the question, it's just, how do we get down here?
Right, and then what will, once this part gets fixed, then we as the community take care of this here. Make that's for everybody. Right now, correct.
Thanks, sir. If I'm understanding that correctly, that 12-foot easement, I think it shows us 12 feet on there, is adjacent to the subject site.
Jason? Yes, sir.
Although the improved gravel meanders towards the water and outside of the easement.
Actually, what happens is the gravel meanders into the subject's property, and then it meanders back and turns into a concrete ramp that goes across the access.
Well, we certainly have comprehensive plan, land development code policies and regulations that require easement access to waterways be maintained and not obstructed. If they propose to put a wall up on that side of the property, it doesn't appear that it would obstruct the access to the water.
Right.
And provide that access is maintained open and unobstructed.
I have no question.
That would be your
Yes, sir.
request?
Yeah.
See any issue
No
with that,
objections.
Jamie?
No.
But I think obviously we're gonna have more people using that ramp with an RV park in there. After the road construction on 331, that finger never got dredged out like it was supposed to. Virtually walk across it, it won't look back.
And I understand that, and I've seen the siltation in there since the roadway has been corrected. I don't think this applicant is responsible for correcting that.
I agree, I'm just bringing it to the board's attention. With more people in that water, it's just gonna get worse.
But my understanding, this is a private access for those people within
Private
the
access.
Sweetwater Lane
Right.
area.
And that's, and.
Not open to the public.
But it does sometimes become open to the public.
I think once the wall is put up, that will solve the issue.
Where as a homeowner can I get a complete set of these plans and comments?
Everything that is submitted is available on the CitizenServe web portal.
Okay.
And if you would like to visit with Rachel Jenkins or one of our administrative assistants at our front desk, they would be very glad to help you understand how to get to that information. But that is one of the things that the county's worked hard at, is improving our transparency. So every document that we receive is posted through that portal on the public website. So anyone that's interested can go and look and spend as much time as you'd like to get comfortable with what is being proposed.
I'll begin to get familiar with it.
And it's open 24 hours a day.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this particular item? Yes, ma'am, if you would come forward to the podium. If you would state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Dora Laisure, Laisure. I live across on Waterside Lane, and this would affect with lights, and I'm also worried about the environment. I'm also worried about safety because of the fact that my understanding is that someone has to be there, check on this community, on the RV, and that's a daily basis. So I know at Calypso, they do a background check on anybody that's coming in. So what kind of safety are they going to have to keep from having any type of predators?
I'm not sure that that is within the purview of Walton County.
Okay.
There is no requirement for us to approve screening criteria for anyone that would want to take advantage of transient lodging or an RV park. That's just not within our ability to regulate.
Okay, who's in charge of making sure that they have someone there checking on what's going on? According to the state rules, that's part of the rules.
That would be the property owner and part of their licensing through the state of Florida.
Thank you.
They would be required to get an RV park license.
Yeah, and that's another question. You have cited them, and I've checked with the state. They don't have a license to rent out a RV to anybody.
Yes, ma'am,
the
and that's
code
why we're here.
But why are they still there?
The code board directed them, or code staff directed them to come get the appropriate development order if they wanted to continue that operation.
So so they can continue it until this is approved or disapproved. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yes, ma'am. Anyone else wish to speak on this topic? I think we've got a recommended or a motion and a second on the floor to continue this to the September 4th Technical Review Committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. in this location. Any further discussion of that pending motion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed likewise. Motion carries. This item will be continued to the September 4th Technical Review Committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. in this location. This moves us to the next item on our agenda this morning, and this is the Basin Bayou Estates minor development application. It's been reviewed by Kelly Frommeyer, and I'll ask Kelly to briefly introduce this project for us.
Yes, thank you. This is the second time the TRC has seen a development proposal on this application. In May, this project was before you with some additional parcels included and some additional density. Since that time, the applicant has resubmitted and is now requesting 5 single-family residential lots on plus or minus 2.86 acres. The future land use is rural residential with a zoning category of rural village. There are still some outstanding questions, specifically concerning the VE and AE fill proposed on the property. And that information is needed in order to confirm that they are at the acceptable density. There are some pretty substantial plan comments from planning staff and from engineering, and deficiencies that do need to be satisfied. The applicant is here to go over any additional questions and comments.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
My name is David Forstrom.
Make sure the mic's on. The button should be up.
Is that better? Yeah. Okay, sorry. David Forstrom, for the record, DAVID-FORSTROM. I'm the authorized agent, engineer, and also a partner with the principal owner of the property on the project. And I'd like to start off as, when we first looked at this, I thought, oh, this is going to be a simple project. We got property on Highway 20 split into 5 lots. I did not understand the complexity of Walton County's rules. That was my fault. So we probably have spent more time on this than we needed to, and I appreciate the patience of all the staff in dealing with this. I've learned a lot about the rules. We did have also a proposal at one time to donate a portion of the property for a waterfront park next to Nick's in order to gain basically 1.1 additional houses. And that property is probably worth about $300,000. And it would have been a win-win, but since that proposal, again, reading the rules more carefully, I understood that can only apply south of Choctachi Bay. So that kind of delayed things too. So this project is not eligible for any density bonuses. That being the case, we went ahead and went down to the basic 5 residential lots without asking for density bonuses. I agree also, there are a lot of comments to address. I pretty much agree with everyone. There's a couple I'd like to talk about, and then I also have a couple questions. The ones that I would like to talk about is the military influence zone question. I did look at the map, and from what I can see, it's not in the military influence zone. And if y'all could just double check that.
It is. It's actually in the impulse zone. On the new comments, I wrote what that impulse zone was and what in the height requirement. The height requirement doesn't restrict you any further than what is currently allowable. It's a 50-foot or 4-story restriction, but I would like it noted on the site plan.
Okay, so that'd be a note on the site plan, but would not impact the development restrictions.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I agree.
Other than to restrict, Walton County measures roof height differently. So this is a height cap at 50 foot solid. So there may be a small implication there.
Okay, so that'll be added as a note in the site plan.
Correct.
The bigger question has to do with fill and compensatory storage. This is in a flood zone, AE and VE flood zone. And because the low-lying land, in order to do the stormwater plan, we need to put some fill in there. And evidently we do exceed, the initial plans exceed the 1-foot fill allowable based over the total square footage of the property. So what we're doing to address that is we are, sorry? we're going to get a new survey done, which will address some other issues, and that will have a much more accurate topography. And then we will lower the fill as required to make sure we don't exceed that 1 foot.
Our original survey,
Sure,
I'm
yeah.
John Henderson, Henderson Engineering.
He's assistant.
The original survey was pretty incomplete, so we've asked a new surveyor to give us some better topography so we can do the earthwork calculation on that. Based on what I had, I looked at it, it was about 1.5 feet of fill across the site. But I did have a question about that because riverine floodplains and coastal floodplains are typically different. You know, filling a little bit of the Choctawhatchee Bay is going to have a different implication than filling a little bit of the Choctawhatchee River up around Caryville or something. Yeah, this site has been severely impacted by erosion. You know, there was a house on it prior to Opal that got destroyed. Looking at some of the old legal descriptions, previously it was 4.5 acres. Now it's down to 2.86 acres. And in another 20 years, the bay's probably going to be chewing at Highway 20 if something's not done there.
Are you suggesting this is not a very good place for a development?
Well, I'm saying it's a piece of property that a private property owner owns and is, you know, able to use it at its highest and best use. But I'm saying without some kind of erosion protection, you know, Highway 20 eventually is going to be.
I think the question is, I'm a certified floodplain manager, and I just got off deployment with FEMA. The question is on compensatory storage. You know, if we add fill to this property, which we will, do we somehow have to compensate for that fill? And that's not required when you're fronting a large water body like a bay. In this case, the bay connects to the Gulf, connects to the ocean, so the fill on that property, while we will meet the 1 foot maximum, there is no compensatory storage requirements based on FEMA regulations because
Not on tidal water bodies.
not on tidal water bodies. I mean, how are we going to influence the rise of the whole Atlantic Ocean? Now, if it was a riverine inside, I can understand that, but for this case, the FEMA regulations do not require compensatory storage, so we would ask that for that not to be required.
If you look at the aerials, you can look at the eastern property that has a seawall. And of course, to the west is the inlet to Basin Bayou, but just west of that is Nick's Restaurant. And if you look at Nick's Restaurant has a seawall and the property on the east side has a seawall. And they just about line up perfectly. But you look at this property and it insets probably 50 feet from those seawalls due to the erosion. And so, I mean, at some point, something's got to be done to protect the property, whether it's split up into 5 lots or it's one single lot or whatever. They've got to put up some kind of riprap or a seawall or something just to protect the property. And so filling comes along with that, you know. It probably wasn't so low prior to Opal, you know. I mean, that's when I would suspect the majority of the erosion occurred during Opal. But, you know, the flood filling issue, floodplain filling, and protecting the property, that's a little bit of a clash. There are, I believe the comp plan allows engineering analysis to show that it doesn't affect, still wouldn't affect the floodplain. And I mean, if we look at the fill that we're proposing based on the volume of the Choctawhatchee Bay, you know, it's insignificant. Certainly not going to cause any flooding problem. So I think that's the thing, the 1 foot of fill over the site, because we've got to have enough fill for infrastructure, and then the floodplain compensation, the volume compensation. It just doesn't seem that on these coastal floodplains that should be an issue.
That's page 12, item 2 of the staff report that we're referring to.
Yeah, for attenuation. So there are exceptions for the actual stormwater management system for the implementations, and I think what you're describing is maybe demonstrating a no-rise situation.
Yeah, in the bay.
In the bay.
Fill, yeah.
For the flood zone, and I think that's what we need.
We can demonstrate
Yeah,
that.
Put it in the file.
Okay.
Okay. So we can fill it more than a foot and don't have to provide the
Now, I think
compensation?
I think those are in two separate two separate items within that section. So the overall fill is limited to the average of 1 foot over the entire site. However, the compensatory storage requirement, I think, can be met by showing you demonstrating a no-rise condition within that.
Well, I'm thinking protecting the property and putting riprap out in front, and, you know, some of the elevations are pretty low. If it's elevation 3, you know, it needs to be probably more than elevation 4.
But the whole site doesn't have to be
Looking at
elevation.
that, I can dig up some old surveys, like I said, that show the 4.5 acres. Can I use 4.5 acres for the, I mean, that's what the property was before it eroded. If I'm using that for the area, then we've got way under.
Well, let me just try to clarify. You can fill more than 1 foot of depth. It just
I
can't
understand,
be
over the
equivalent
whole-
to a.
That's why
an
I'm
average.
asking if I can use the whole 4.5 acres that used to be before the erosion.
I don't think so. I think where the survey is based on the property boundaries that exist today, and
I don't think that the 1 foot is gonna be adequate to protect the property. I mean, regardless of what is developed on the property. There needs to be some kind of provision to, you know, for coastal armoring, you know. And, you know, based on the comp plan, we could put in a seawall if there's a seawall on both sides. Well, there is. We've got the Basin Bayou Inlet in between us. There's a seawall on the east and a seawall on the west. And if we connected those, then we'd have the 4.5 acres back.
You can also block the access to that lake.
Well, on the other side, you know, on the other hand, there's a bridge abutment on one side of us and a seawall on the other. Does that also qualify to put in a seawall in between the two armored structures? See, now that's, you got a seawall at Nick's and a seawall on the east side of us, nothing on our property, and that's what caused all the erosion. You know, if you've got an armoring on both sides and nothing in the middle, that's where all the energy's concentrated.
I recommend you talk to Scott Caraway
Okay.
about coastal armoring and make the argument regarding the armoring underneath the bridge that's adjacent to the property, and there being another seawall on the east side of the property. You may be able to qualify
Okay.
based on that.
So if we could qualify for that, we could get a permit to put in a seawall, fill all that area. And how does that affect our flood?
My comment is limited to the first part of that, not that you can do all of this. I don't
Okay.
know if you can or not. I don't know if you can put the seawall in there, but Scott Caraway will be able to tell us.
Okay.
And we'll look to him for that particular determination as to whether or not that's allowable or not. But you're certainly welcome to approach him with that idea and include that in your resubmittal.
I think you can armor the shoreline without filling the parcels by building the structures on piles. Is your argument that
we'll
you
build those.
need to fill it to
Well, we're
provide
gonna
the
need to
armoring?
fill portion of it. We need to fill for stormwater because, you know, it's low and groundwater issues and septic issues. So we do need to fill portions of it. The houses will be on pilings because the flood zone elevation's so high, we're gonna have to elevate them. But I'm just talking about out front, putting some riprap or something and just raising the elevation a few feet just to keep the waves from eroding the shoreline so much. You know, it's not, it needs some kind of protection.
I mean, are you proposing to restore the 50-foot shoreline protection zone?
I'm not sure what you're asking. I mean, we'll have a 50-foot shoreline protection zone. I mean, right now, there's about 50 foot of water that used to be property.
But there's native vegetation growing there of some kind.
Currently, yeah. Yeah, we're gonna maintain the existing, I mean, unless we end up building a seawall out in the water, if we get, approval for that, then we'd have a different, I guess, line protection zone.
If we get to that point, don't look to put a lawn all the way down to the seawall.
No, I'm just
They'll have
looking at
shoreline
some kind
protection.
of elevation that's above the wave height to minimize the erosion.
Recommendation is to talk to Scott Caraway in Public Works about coastal armoring and see if that's appropriate for this location. It very well might be.
I had one comment about the density. And you can see on the plan that I hatched an area that's in the VE zone on lot 1, 3, 4, and 5. That hatched area is the lot buildable area inside the setback that's in the VE zone. So that hatched area is actually the area that I was considering in the density calculation. Is that a little more clear?
Where then is the, let me see.
Comments on page 11.
Also on page 6.
Okay, also
Yeah,
yes.
number 2.
Okay.
That
There were,
0.172 acres.
correct, yeah.
That's the hatched area that's,
It's called out as 3,634 square feet.
yeah, that was caught. I think Scott caught, or Aaron caught that. That was a typo at the legend. The 0.172 acres in the density calculation, that was the correct.
We just needed to make sure we had
I'll have that
clarification so we could get the correct density calculations.
So you're saying that hatched area is 1.7 something acres?
0.17.
0.17, okay.
Mhm.
I was gonna say,
0.17.
whoa, that's a little, oh, gotcha.
Access road. We're already fronting Highway 20, and we really don't want an access road. We don't want another right-of-way. We've got utilities, we've got everything there. The only issue is having 5 driveways on Highway 20.
This is about to be a 4-lane highway.
And so we're trying to minimize our accesses, the driveways. So we wanted to do one common driveway. But we don't want one street going into it. We really don't need a street. We don't need another 50-foot right-of-way. We don't need utilities. Everything's out on Highway 20. We have a Highway 20 address. So, I mean, can we just do a common driveway and an easement, being that all our utilities come straight off of 20? Not have a right-of-way? It's plenty wide enough for emergency vehicle to do a T-type turnaround in there.
I mean, do we have a comment in here about that, or
Yeah, there was a couple. It was,
which ones are they?
number 8 on page 7, access road must be designed to standards of the local street. So, yeah, I was 50-foot right-of-way, all that stuff, turnarounds at the end of it, which it's basically a T as it is. A gate, or a one-way street, I think, was a sign. Requirement, yeah, dead-end street, which it's just a driveway, it's gonna be gated, so.
How you gonna gate it?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the gates weren't shown on the site plan, is that?
I think that was.
No, we didn't show the gates on the site plan.
Okay, yeah, it's not.
But if we do, we make sure
It's gonna be gated.
we'll do the throat clearance and all that.
I don't know how you're gonna have room to gate this and meet the requirements for a gated entrance.
75-foot.
75 throat, okay. yeah.
I would nix the gate idea right now, and if we need to address it later.
Yeah, if we have to
It's
put a
not on our-
dead-end sign on it.
You have to have
I mean, we can-
turnaround outside the gate and that kind of thing.
It's not on our
also.
plan, so just ignore the last.
Yeah,
We
I
can
don't
put a
comment.
dead-end sign, that's not a big deal, but, I mean, does it have to be a right-of-way and a public street and meet all those
No,
requirements?
it doesn't have to be a public street.
Well,
It can be a
or
private street, the
does it
right-of-way
have to
can
meet
meet
all-
the private right-of-way requirements. It can be an easement.
Well, that's what I had, an easement.
But we need it improved to meet the standard.
Well, I'm showing a gravel drive, but it's a subgrade and a road base, just without asphalt, so, I mean, it will be a driveway. It's just not a street, doesn't meet
Right.
street requirements,
Dri-
doesn't have the right-of-way requirements.
The conversation that we had in the staff review was concerning the code silence on shared driveways for platted subdivisions. So that was a concern that since it was not specifically included, that it was excluded in code.
I mean, they already front a right-of-way, that's the thing here. It's not an access issue.
And there was, I think, a comment that may play into this, number 6, on page 7, to confirm what the actual right-of-way on 20 is, because right-of-way protection may apply,
Yes.
which could set that back further.
We are getting a new survey this week.
Yeah.
We have hired a new surveyor. It'll be much better. Yes. We'll
Yeah,
address
if
all
it's in
those
the
comments.
right-of-way protection zone, we can push that easement back, that's not an issue.
That might make a difference to where that placement goes.
Okay.
But I think the provision for having a turnaround was removed with the current plan.
I think that was an
because they were less than
engineering
150 feet.
Correct. But the way I read the code is if you're no more than 150 feet, you don't have to have a turnaround. Okay, good.
Yeah, engineering comments, label the road as public or private, and provide an appropriate turnaround. I mean, that's the thing, it's for 5 homes. We need to provide a T turnaround or a cul-de-sac at each end of the gravel driveway, and it just seems like a lot for,
I don't think we need,
Common
I don't think,
drive
we don't need a
for-
turnaround. She's already addressed that.
well, that's, like I said, that was engineering had the comment.
Okay.
That's fine. I think you meet the dimensional requirements for that, for not needing that.
Do we have consensus whether the access easement is allowed, or does it have to be some form of right-of-way?
We're not looking for it to be dedicated to the county. We're looking for it to remain private, privately owned, privately maintained.
It just presents a lot of other issues, you know, and we gotta name the road, then they're fronting this other road, they're not fronting Highway 20.
Well, it's basically a safety issue to limit egress and ingress to one point on the highway. That's the whole reason behind it. If it wasn't the safety issue, then they all front the highway.
You talked to GIS addressing about that?
I have not, no.
I want to.
Okay.
Because there are some rules about assigning addresses.
I think there's a comment about a public mail kiosk.
Yeah, we can do that. We have no
Yeah,
problem.
the post office is going to require that.
No big deal.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a big requirement to meet.
So we got, the easement's okay, the floodplain storage compensation, we can get around that with an engineering analysis. 1 foot, that's pretty much, we're stuck with that. Determine that, or we're gonna ask Scott about that, if we can put more for protection, or,
That would still be our floodplain manager comment. So you need to get with either Jason or Aaron on that one, and I think this show up under the environmental comments.
it's flood comment.
Scott will speak to you about the seawall only. Direct any other related questions to planning staff.
I have additional question.
Sure.
Regarding a sidewalk, my opinion, a sidewalk there would be a waste. It's not needed. You know, they're going to four-lane the road. So I did send an email requesting that the sidewalk requirement be waived. I just want to see if there's been a decision on that.
Waiving it, there hadn't been a decision on that. Buying, we'd certainly entertain buying it out.
The memo request needs to be uploaded into the Citizen Serve portal as part of the site plan documentation.
Oh, regarding a sidewalk?
We'll do that with a
Okay.
resubmittal.
Okay, so
Any
it wasn't in the
request.
right format, okay.
Any request. would be
Okay.
good.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions from any member at the dais?
I have one question. When's the highway going to be four-lane? Because I didn't know that.
It has been moved up into the 5-year work plan.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I think it got advanced at the last meeting. Where exactly it's going
That
to
design
be.
or right-of-way
I think it's
acquisition? or-
PD&E. But it's coming, and it's coming faster than we were expecting. And that's a lot of road to put in a small space, given how narrow the right-of-way is. And
I'm sure they'll do something with the bridge too. That would,
Yeah.
that could be a benefit if it was higher.
It might be. We just don't know at this stage. Seeing no other questions, how much time do we need to resubmit?
Yeah, we gotta get that survey.
Survey will be done, they're doing the survey this week. So,
Oh, we're not
how much time do we have to make I guess what would be the timeline options?
Well, 5 days to make the next TRC.
Yeah, that would
We
be a
may not
stretch.
make the next one.
Well, 5 days would be a stretch. I couldn't promise
No,
that
we
right
won't-
now.
We won't have the survey in 5 days.
Yeah, the next TRC
Right.
is August 21st. The following one is 2 weeks later on September 4th. I think you make September,
We'll make the September 4th, yes.
and I think we could continue it to that date, and if you need more
If we're not
time,
close
just
enough, we'll just ask for another.
Staff
continuance.
report will be due before then.
Okay.
Let me confirm the staff report date on that, because I think that, okay. Yeah, so it would have to be submitted at least by the 21st or 22nd in order, well, actually, I would prefer the 19th in order for staff to have time to review it and get comments back ahead of the 26th. If that's not possible, the September 18th meeting would need to move back.
So August 19th is the deadline to be on the September 4?
At absolute minimum, yeah. So
Absolute
we'd have-
minimum.
Yeah, so we would have time to review the site plan before we were
Okay.
required to turn in our comments.
I would say our plan is to do that, but
It's pretty ambitious.
if we don't do it, what happens?
you
We'll just be continuing.
ask to continue.
Okay, so at least to give us a goal to see, okay.
Yeah, September 4th looks like the earliest we could get back together on this. If you need more time, just make the request, and we'll certainly consider that.
Hopefully this will be it, because I also want to get this done. I'm sure y'all do too, so.
Sure be happy to, yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to continue this application to the September 4th Technical Review Committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. in this location.
Motion.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
This item is continued to September 19th at 8:30 a.m. in this location. Thank you.
Thank you.
That moves us to the next item, 2377 Highway 20 Storage, small scale amendment, requested approved by ordinance. It's been reviewed by Kelly Frommeyer. Kelly, if you could briefly introduce it for us.
Yes, sir, and I will try to be brief on this one. This is a small-scale land use map and official zoning map amendment application submitted by Frank Watson and Pete Barton on behalf of Fidelity Limited Land Trust number 470, requesting approval to change the future land use from rural residential to industrial and extractive uses, and the zoning map district from rural village to light industrial on 4.73 acres. On a property that is located on Highway 20. This property was previously part of a landfill and sand company, and most of the land uses surrounding this would fall under something that would hit our industrial land use category, particularly the adjacency across Highway 20 and to one parcel to the east. The property to the west and to the rear, the south, are also previous part of this landfill and sand company property. There's some data in the staff report that talks about the adjacencies and the history of the site. I have requested and just recently received additional maps to add in that show the proposed land use. Currently, the maps you have just show what is currently the future land use and currently the zoning. So those maps will be inserted prior to Planning Commission. Planning staff did not have any comments about the completeness of the application or any of the data itself. There are very few comments listed, and then all of the attachments that are part of the packet that you should have. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Kelly.
Board, we're merely right now, this property is a.
Frank, can you state your name for the record and spell your last name, please?
I apologize. Watson, Franklin H. Watson, for the applicant. We're requesting a land change. Simply, right now, the property is, for lack of a better expression, an eyesore, and trying to get it to a zoning that it would actually be fitting for that particular piece of property. With it being rural village, there's a number of current surrounding properties. I spoke to some people in Hammock Bay that have been worried about water quality and everything else in the world, if you can imagine, as far as the surrounding landfills. The light industrial that we're requesting wouldn't have any residential units, very few use with regards to water and sewer, and it seemed appropriate that the land zoning that we're asking to change to would be appropriate use for that particular location.
Right. I noticed the access to that old landfill appears to be through this parcel. Is that correct?
No, sir. The county actually just improved a access to it to the west. So there's actually a piece of, if you can see the yellow parcel that is directly due west on Highway 20, that's a new access that actually enters the landfill to the back.
Any other questions from Dias? This proposed application will receive public hearings at the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners, subject to being recommended out of this particular committee. Is there anyone here that wishes to make a technical comment or ask a technical question regarding compliance with Land Development Code or Comprehensive Plan? Seeing none, we'll move forward to recommend a motion.
Recommended that this move forward to the September 12th Planning Commission meeting.
Motion as recommended.
We have a motion to move it forward to Planning Commission for the September meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed likewise? This motion is carried and it will be advertised for the next available Planning Commission meeting in September.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. That'll move us to the next item on our agenda, the South Walton Commerce Park, lots 34 and 35. This is a major development reviewed by Bob Baronti. Bob, could you briefly introduce it for us?
Sure. My name is Bob Baronti, Baronti. This project, as you stated, is a major development order application submitted by Interlight Engineering Corporation on behalf of St. Joe Timberland Company of Delaware, LLC, requesting the approval to construct 93,549 square feet commercial storage facility with 952 square feet office and associated parking and infrastructure on 3 acres plus or minus, with a future land use of commercial and a zoning of business park. The project is located on the northeast corner of Senora Road and US Highway 98. It's identified by the project numbers in your staff report. This is, as you know, this is the front lots of the South Walton Commerce Park. Because it is in the scenic corridor, it will have to go to the technical or the DBR or Design Review Board. It's currently scheduled for the September meeting pending successful completion of the TRC report. They have received separate ERB comments, and Tim feels that they have enough time to reply to those comments. We have some just limited comments on the actual project itself. I don't think there's anything too difficult in meeting these comments. Mr. David Smith is here to present the project, and I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Bob. I usually say good morning to these. Good afternoon. And,
Sorry.
No, it's all good. But I agree with Bob. We did receive the comments. We are addressing them. And I'm David Smith for the record, SMITH. And so I have no further comments. Everything's straightforward, and we're addressing them, and we'll be resubmitting.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Do we have a recommended motion, Bob?
A motion to recommend conditional approval pending successful completion of the staff comments, and to move it to DRB once the DRB comments have been addressed.
And do we have a motion of the dais?
Motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Hearing none, motion is carried. It'll be moved forward to the Design Review Board.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to item number 10, the Affordable Homes Temporary Storage Minor Development Order. This has been reviewed by Renee Bradley.
Actually, it's my project, sir. This is a minor development order application submitted
Make
on.
sure we update the ad.
Yes, sir. This is a minor development order application submitted on behalf of BH Holdings Group LLC, requesting approval for a temporary storage area for mobile homes on 6.86 plus or minus acres with a future land use and zoning of industrial. The project is located on the north side of Highway 90 at 2226 US Highway 90 West Phoenix Springs, Florida, and is identified by the project number. Mr. Chair, mainly there's planning comments. None of them are unconquerable. So staff, I don't believe there's anybody here for the agent. So if there's no one here for any additional comments, which doesn't appear to be, I'd like to make a motion to conditionally approve pending successful resubmittal of the staff comments.
Thank you, Bob. This is a minor development order, so we're going to take the opportunity to open a public hearing and accept comments from any member of the audience that wishes to speak on this particular item. Anyone here wishing to speak on the affordable homes application? Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing portion of this meeting. We have a recommended motion.
Recommend motion to conditionally approve pending successful resubmittal of staff's comments and move it to the development order stage.
Thank you, Bob. Do we have a motion at the dais?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed likewise? Hearing none, this item is conditionally approved to move forward to development order subject to satisfaction of any outstanding comments. And that completes our agenda this morning. We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
We're all in favor. Motion carries.
I don't know.
Chinese Mac will be able to answer your question. But Mac will be able to answer.
Oh, okay.
Guys, sorry I gotta run.